Hello and welcome to another edition of whatever I'm going to call this podcast because I think it already needs another rename. Today is a really interesting milestone for the podcast because this is the first time we've had somebody come back on the show. I'm here again with Thea, also known as Thea Beasty or Thea Beasty. Goes by many names, but she has returned for another round of chatting, conversation, interviewing, and all kinds of stuff. Welcome to the show.
And thanks so much for having me a second time, John. The first time was so fun. We just had to continue it, didn't we?
We did. We literally had to stop our conversation, and we got through 25% of my notes I'd prepared, so we have 75% more to go. Might be a 4-part series, if not more things in the future. Who knows? We're gonna find out. See where the conversation goes today.
I'm okay with this plan.
I love it. That's wonderful. Well, why don't we go ahead and get down to business? In terms of topics we missed the last time that I really wanted to ask you about. We talked a lot about your academic experience last time and some life goal aspirations, but one thing we didn't touch on is you as a writer, because you are a very serious writer from what I can tell and have written a novel and are trying to get it published, or did you succeed in that?
Yes. Okay, so I stopped talking about the novel after a while because I found that advertising it for years wasn't good. Because I started writing a novel when I was in high school still, and I
Okay.
finished it like it finished is a rough term, like not post edit. It still needs to
Yeah.
be edited
Like
until I'm satisfied with it. But yes, I did finish the novel, and I've been wanting to publish it now for 2 years. I finally decided I was going to self-publish,
mm-hmm.
and the plan was to do this in March, April, and then out of the blue, I got accepted into university
Okay.
a few months late. So they had to tell me I'm in by December. They told me in April, and classes already started. So
Wow.
I suddenly had to put that on hold, and now I am having a vacation again. So I can now maybe try and finish it in the vacation and really get the publication process started. That would be amazing.
That would be incredible. And so, are you still going to go down the path potentially of self-publishing here?
I'm 100% self-publishing, yes, because agents I found are a very difficult group. They sort of don't want to find that diamond in the rough anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the moment you mention you're a 23-year-old girl from South Africa who has nothing behind her name, you know, they immediately just disregard that. The problem is they don't even read the first few pages of the novel. They never request the novel to begin with. So it's not like I've been rejected for my work. I've been rejected for my your queries, what you call it in the literature world. So you give them a letter telling them who you are and what your novel's about. And yeah, so what they tend to do now is they have so many people to choose from, such a saturated field.
Mm-hmm.
They just sort of choose people who already have published before, or people who are already well known in some sort of field, so they know the novel's going to sell.
Okay.
Ironically, I started asking them about this before I started streaming. So when I tell them now, hey, I'm a streamer and a caster, they'll probably eat that right up.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, no, you had your chance. I'm self-publishing now, and I'm getting 100% of the revenue, and I'm happy with that.
Nice. And that actually seems like for my initial thoughts, is it seems like a good strategy of, okay, look, there are a million people writing books, because books are hard to write, but it's also one of the lowest barrier entries ever. If you have a pencil and paper, you can write a book. It needs time, effort, and thought, obviously, and a lot of it. But it's not like starting an airplane company and you need $200 million for your first jet. And that hence saturation, hence everybody wants to write a book, because writing a book I always feel like is that peak of like academic knowledge of whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It's like, oh yeah, I was able to turn my thoughts into words that are fascinating, thousands upon thousands of words, hundreds of pages, or 100 plus, whatever amount you're writing, and it's so cool, and everybody wants it. You're going to go down this path. It makes a lot of sense. Go down and self-publish. Then also you have, hey, I've self-published a book. I sold this number of copies to a small group, and this was the reception. Would you ever publish like a preview chapter? Like, how are you going to get the word out if you're going to self-publish?
Well, I mean, I now have something that the majority of writers don't have, which is tragic in itself, because normally these writers write a book. It could be the next Harry Potter novel. They
Mm-hmm.
self-publish and they have their family and close friends who know of it. And the world simply never finds out about this book because there are
Mm-hmm.
so many. So which is really bad. But now I have a big Twitch community, and I mean, wow, if only 100 people out of all the people I know were
Mm-hmm.
to buy a novel, for instance. I'm not forcing you to buy my novels, chat. I'm just saying. But if that were to happen,
Definitely
if I had that built-in support, or I mean, that already puts your list substantially higher on a bestseller list on Amazon, for instance, meaning more people get to see the book, people who
Mm-hmm.
don't know you, which is the goal. So the goal is always to sell a certain amount of books within your first week, because ironically, that's how bestsellers are determined. Not the overall amount sold throughout the book's lifespan, but the first week is really important. That determines whether your book's a bestseller or not. So I'm going to definitely advertise this book like crazy the moment it's actually in the process of publication. But until then, I talk about it, but I don't actually advertise it per se.
That makes sense, right? You want to build the hype right around when it's coming out to get that first week. That's brutal. That
Yes.
explains why so many, you hear the stories of authors buying their own book as quickly as possible when it comes out.
That's one of the ways, actually. That's one of the hacks. Is what you well, Amazon has ways of preventing that, of course. But yeah, you can literally just make many accounts, or you can pay your friends to buy altogether 3,000 books, which I believe puts you on one of the New York Times bestsellers lists. You can
Wow.
do that. You can totally do that. You can see that as an advertisement opportunity because now people know of the book. It's a weird ball game. It's really difficult to make it if you're just the average person who doesn't have that income, who doesn't have a platform of their own, so it's a difficult journey for most people. But I feel a lot better now where I am. I won't be buying my own books in bulk in 3,000s. That won't be happening. Maybe for a friend or two. But yeah, that's one of the ways to do it.
Interesting. Yeah, it's that tough reality of here's this incredible goal of writing a book and making it famous versus kind of the cruel mechanics of behind the scenes and how you can potentially exploit those that are totally independent of whether you have a good book or not. How to potentially get in, are you popular or not? If not, we're not going to even read your book. You're just a nobody. If you have 3,000 friends ready to buy and you pay them off, hey, great, you have a bestseller. Congratulations. It's tough.
That's what breaks the soul of writers, because at the end of the day, it's a product of creativity, right? But it's also a product. And the thing is, a lot of writers don't treat it as such. So I'm not saying write a book with the idea of making money, but at the end of the day, this is a product, and selling the product is half of the work. Because like I said, you can write J.K. Rowling's next book, but if you give that book to a random person, put their name on it, and tell them to go and sell it, it won't sell unless you treat it as a product, which is ironic because most writers are very introverted and aren't used to going out and advertising things. So they have to go to schools, they have to go to their nearest news stations, they have to sort of hype up this product, and most of them don't do that, and the books just flop.
Yes, that makes sense. I think it's books that are bestsellers that had to use more exploitative strategies. I know Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek and Rich Dad Poor Dad both had some pretty degenerate strategies to get noticed. And so I think, yeah, it's a tough balance of can you sell, can you put it out there, and also that breaking down of this is my pure expression of self, this is what I can do, versus it's a product. Right, half the battle is getting it in the hands. No matter how good it is, if nobody buys it, it's flop, and it'll be forgotten. That's tough.
It's so sad.
Yeah,
it's horrible. It's really horrible. Yeah, but I mean, it's like they always use J.K. Rowling as an example, and I do too. It's like, well, her book was rejected 7 times before someone actually picked it up, which just goes to show how subjective the whole experience is. But yeah, it's just one of those things. But like I said, I feel a lot better now knowing that I have this huge community who I know they'll try and support here and there. Like just getting word out of a book on a platform without expecting people to buy it is just again, like many people don't have that platform, which is just, yeah, I have that now. So I'm very privileged to at least be able to say to my, viewers, hey, I did write a book, if it's just so you're welcome to go check it out if you'd like, or tell people about it. But it's something that most people can't do, which makes a huge difference. So I'm quite thankful for that. At least it helps finishing off the final touches of the book. It helps calm the nerves.
No, and I'm confident you're the type of person that will finish that book and leverage what you've built, right? You have a vast Twitch community, you have a popular YouTube channel, and you have a very popular Twitter, right? You've built out a social presence. It was through Gwent, but it doesn't mean that you can't use that as a stepping stone for other projects as well, right? A community is a community, and if they're some of them are there probably for Gwent, but a number of them are going to be there for you. It's up to you to figure out how you can keep delivering them, I guess, more of you in a sense, right? Hey, I wrote a book. This is my thoughts. This is what I came up with. If you like me as a person, you might like these thoughts and ideas. Check it out. I think it's brilliant. Are there any?
I mean,
please.
Yeah, it is a science fiction. It's, I feel like it's very much in touch with what Gwent people would like overall. It's a young adult though, meaning you can read it from like 16 and up, but still it's a work of fiction at least. So it's like this, set on a different planet with different sort of creatures and all of that. So I can see people in Gwent at least sort of maybe liking it, but hey, we'll see. I think a lot of people just like the medieval Witcher stance, which is something altogether. It's a totally different story. But yeah, it's like you do, right? You have your podcast, your main audience is Gwent, but it's always good to give a little bit more of you and see who sticks around for that. It's especially if you're growing, right? It's at the end of the day, you shouldn't be totally dependent on the game you stream, because you don't know what the direction that game will go. It could go very well, or it could flop like Bitcoin, and then all your money is gone.
100%. And have you heard of the idea of 1,000 true fans?
I haven't. Okay. Tell me about it.
So it's this really cool, it was a blog post. I think it was reprinted in Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titan. But if you're listening to this, watching this, take a moment, pause it, Google 1,000 true fans. You'll get like a weird website. It has just, like half a page or page written on it. And it is brilliant. It is so unbelievably intelligent if you are interested in starting a stream or a business. And the concept is really easy. Everyone sits there and says, man, I want to be the next XQC in the streaming. I want to be the next, what are some other big names? Mr. Beast. I want to be the next Warren Buffett, Elon Musk. You pick your idols you're looking at. But with the 1,000 true fans idea, say, look, you can try that and you can aim for it, but it'll take a long time to get there. You might not succeed. Here is a reasonable goal for if you're trying to get into business, which is already hard enough. If you can get 1,000 people to give you $10 a month, these are 1,000 people to just buy whatever it is. So maybe some month you release a shirt, some merch, right? Or you put out a book. You put out a musical song. They'll listen to it and you get royalties for that. Like whatever it is. You get $10 a month per person. From 1,000 people, it's $120,000 a year, right? That's a great income. You're going to do fine of $120,000 of income coming in. Maybe you have to spend a portion of that covering equipment costs, etc. Raw materials to make a shirt. It's going to be great, and no matter what. And so instead of setting your bar of, I'm going to be the most popular person of all time, focus on how do I condense a group of people around me that are invested in me, that will support me no matter where I go, and build from there. And that, I think, is a much more reliable way to build out a career doing stuff and taking on the extra risk than being dependent on a game, than being dependent on, reselling somebody else's product. You want people invested in you, especially if you're a personality. So I'm with you about that.
I mean, it's quite spot on. It's a specific number. I mean, 1,000 is always good, right? But yeah, it's like you said, it's essentially having that core community who's there for you no matter what. It's like family. Not to sound cliche, but they're there if you're going to be playing a different game. If they're there, or if you're going to just chatting or do a podcast, they stick around because they're there at the end of the day to hear you, and they're not only there for Gwent. But like I always say to my community, it's okay to also just be there for Gwent, you know? It's fine if you want to see just Gwent. But yeah, there are also always going to be one or two extra people that join that core community every few months who genuinely just want their, you know, they just want to be talking to you and having a nice conversation. And that's truly, you know, those are special people. They're hard to find, but when you find them, I mean, they just change everything, right?
They do, and they're the core that's there. If Gwent went down tomorrow, there would be a lot of streamers who could not get back on their feet because they invested 100% of their content into Gwent. Now it's gone, right? That core game. And other thing, you gotta climb back up elsewhere, right? If you put everything in Artifact, for example, when it first came out, it's gone. Nobody streams that game anymore. It flopped in the end. So there's a lot of wisdom. As for the 1,000 number, it can be any number, right? You can say, okay, maybe I need 800 people. Maybe I need 500 people that are really invested in me to make it happen. You can pick whatever number you want. I think it's important to have, though, a number in mind, because most of us aren't going to be the next Ludwig pulling in 30, 40, 50, 60K viewers. But we might be able to pull in your case, you're already pulling several hundred. I'm trying to get myself to about I'm getting closer to 100 consistently. Let's call me around 70. We'll see. Yeah, it's fine. But I think the real
900 to go. 900
exactly.
to go.
900 to go, and then getting those core people is matter. It's all a game of growing, but it's more important, I think, to have people grow with you and invested in you than the game itself. Not that you can't love the game. I adore Gwent, obviously, but
of course.
Goes back to, well, two other things I want to say. One is I call my group the Plain Talk family. We're all part of the family, so I'm with you on the family aspect of it all the way. And
100%.
Yeah, I think you also want to, and the other thing I wanted to make, just random points, is you want to keep, when you're building out a business, a stream, YouTube channel, I think targeting people in such a way that you're trying to get them invested in you instead of the game is key. Because the moment Gwent disappears, a lot of names we know and love and respect right now will probably disappear. Not assuming that's happening anytime soon, not leaking anything. I think it'll be here. Gwent's here for a while, but if it did, bad.
Of course, and that's just, again, that's total. That's investing in stocks and in you know, Bitcoin and all that. It's the same philosophy, you know. If you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, I make a point of it every now and then. And I know Lionheart does this as well, where we certainly try and play other games other than Gwent. Just to reinforce that idea that, you know, we could play other games. You know, there's more to us than just Gwent. And it's also fun seeing that people stick around. Of course, the numbers decrease normally by 2/3 at least, which is also to be expected because, I mean, people watch because they want to watch Gwent content mostly. But it's really nice seeing over the years how that number that goes to the next game grows. I'd say that's your core audience, right?
I agree.
And that it's really nice because, I mean, back in the day, you know, when I was had 80 viewers and 16 would stick to the next game, and then you know, we're growing now to 300 and 120 sticks to the next game, and it's like, you know, like I like that 120, you know. I'm okay with this, you know. If you're not dependent on income, you know, I always say this is a hobby that pays. It's not my job, though it's the only job I have, so it's a bit of a catch-22. But it's yeah, like, I'm still a student, so luckily I don't require income to survive right now. It's more of saving for the future. But it's like I can totally be content one day if I had to just up and leave for some reason, or Gwent just, you know, someone hacked Gwent and deleted it. I'm very happy with that 120 just going on with me and us, you know, chilling and just chatting and talking about deep things. And you know, I have a lot of people who tune into Gwent who don't even watch Gwent anymore. They don't know how Gwent works. That, to me, that's just the ultimate compliment. If someone's there and they have no idea what's happening, but they're there anyway.
Yeah, they're there for you.
Yeah, so I completely understand what you're saying, and it's very true. It's spot on.
Right, and it sounds like you're gonna have 120 novels sold as soon as you go live in that first week. Which is quite a nice.
Hey, maybe.
I
they
mean,
don't necessarily. So I mean, let's see who sticks. It's not necessarily people who can afford a novel. To be fair, so I would never expect it of them. But hey, it's still good. It's good to get the word out, to say the least.
No, I'd be curious. I think you'll get good support, right? And that goes back, right? You build up this audience, even though it's a hobby. You've done an incredible job with it, and
Yes.
you have that audience. You can push that novel. It'll be good, and I'm sure they're gonna like it
Yeah.
too.
Hey, let's hope.
So,
That's the reason it's not published yet. I want to make sure that the little things I didn't like in the novel gets ironed out before everybody starts criticizing it. Because once it's out there, it's out there. There's not much you can do about it then.
I can't casually. Well, I mean, I think J.K. Rowling's tried, but it's hard to retcon your stuff. Go back. It's like, oh yeah, that printed text. We're gonna ignore that. This character actually this or that, or this doesn't work. We just publish it. Once the book's out, it's out. And then even if you're an author, I find if you say interpret it differently, sometimes the world's like, nah, we don't like your interpretation. We like the words on the page better. We're gonna stick with the words on the page.
Exactly. It's tricky. It's tricky. Now, in some areas, I purposely leave out information so people can interpret it instead. But yeah, it's more the plot holes I say that need to,
Yeah,
it needs to go. Like, oh gosh, because it's a science fiction, it's not fantasy, meaning it needs to be possible, essentially. In a science fiction, everything you write needs to be possible. You can't have flying unicorns in a science fiction because that's not a thing. So when you're on this other planet,
Okay.
I decided, well, I want 3 suns on this planet, and the amount of research I had to conduct to make sure that everything I wrote regarding these 3 suns were accurate is ridiculous. Because I don't even go into it that much. But 3 suns means you have 3 shadows, yes? And is there nighttime? How does it work? I had to make sure it's possible. And I found a planet in our solar system that actually has 3 suns. And they explained in detail how it works. And luckily, I was correct in my thinking. In certain seasons, you will see all 3 suns in the sky at different times, and you'll have nighttime, and the days could be longer. And I was like, thank you, I got that right. Because you just wait for that one person to say, well, actually, that's not possible, right? Because, exactly. So, yeah, there's a lot of research that goes into it, more than anything, just to make sure that people don't pick it apart in years to come.
Yep, that makes that you have to be careful because there's going to be people who want to pick it apart too. So they'll sit there being like, actually, this is wrong. I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson pointed out to James Cameron that the stars were wrong in the original Titanic for the date it was supposed to be. James Cameron had to correct it in the rework of it, or like the revisiting or remastering of it. It's just little things that someone's going to point it out. And
of
so
course.
It's frustrating. Have you read, speaking of stars, just a bit of a tangent, have you read, I think it's called Nightfall by Isaac Asimov?
I haven't.
Speaking of suns, you should check out that one. I think it has 6 suns, but it's been a long time since I read it. It's a quick short story.
Nightfall. Okay, I'll look it up right after this.
I think if you want a slightly darker take on suns and such, it's a fun one.
All right, 6 suns. That's twice as much as I have.
I think so. I might be remembering wrong. It's been
I have to
maybe a
up
decade.
my suns. My
7.
I'm coming second here. Yeah, I need at least 7 now.
Yeah, if my book is not the one with the most suns in it, then what's the point, right?
Exactly.
So by the way, how long did it take you to write this book? So I mean, you're in the process still editing and such, but the initial draft, right? Step 1.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the initial draft got finished within 2 years, but the problem is I started writing it when I was about 17. And the thing is, which is perfect because that's my target audience, so I knew exactly what I wanted in a novel. It's just I didn't have the tools to correctly write it down yet because I had to teach myself because it's, in high school you write short stories, which is 3,000 words max. But here you have to get up to 100,000 words, and suddenly you have to teach yourself a lot of things like character development. That doesn't happen in a short story, it's too short, and you have to have different stories in the story, it can't just be character A needs to get from this point to this point. There needs to be little things happening in between, which is a lot to navigate, actually. But yeah, so I put the book aside, I did my studies, I came back to it a year later, reread it, and I added 50 to 100 pages more. And I thought, okay, now this is better. I put it aside. I had studies. This is the thing, right? So I'm not writing constantly. I have other things that need to be
'cause
done,
you're a student.
unfortunately.
Hmm.
So yeah, I keep getting back and I'm grown and I'm more educated and I reread it and I see, oh gosh, I didn't like the way this part is written and this part needs to be rewritten. And so that's constantly happening, where I've reached a point now where I'm saying, look, Tia, you're starting to read your book because it's a first person book from a 16-year-old boy's perspective. And I'm starting to not relate to what he's saying anymore, which I realize it's because I've grown up. So back when I was 17, I thought it was cool to think in a certain way. And now I just think, oh, what a child. He's so, immature. But meanwhile, that's exactly what I thought I wanted when I was young. So I now need to stop rewriting and stick to what I have, because essentially that's the core story, right? So now I'm only working on fixing technical, plot holes and technical things regarding grammar and all that. It's mostly grammar I'm working on right now. Things I don't like about wording and the way things are phrased. The story is done, though. It has been for quite some time.
Nice. So that's a tough problem to face. It sounds like you keep having periods where you can write, like vacation, as you mentioned earlier in the interview. Then you go study.
Yes.
You come back. Now you're older, so you're better equipped maybe to edit things. But that core story that you loved when you were younger and you understood exactly what the audience was because you were writing it for yourself and people in your age group. Now you're saying, wow, what this character I'm relating to less and less. And it goes back to that worry you mentioned earlier, where maybe your audience on the stream might not like it as much because you have a wide range of ages, and that's not necessarily your target audience, right? So you might have people in their 30s who like hanging out on your stream, but they're not young adults anymore, so they might not like it as much. But you have a paradox where you're also getting older, and you're trying to fix. You're trying to fix up this book to make sure it's accurate without changing it. That's a lot of faith in your 17-year-old self, though. Do you ever doubt that your 17-year-old self wrote a bad story?
The thing is, the character, the main... How can I put this? So, if I can give the basic plot of the story, I could explain it to you better.
Do it.
It's all right. So essentially, it's written in real time, meaning it's not a dystopian. It's not something that takes place in the future. It's in the here and now. That's why it has to be science fiction. So it's this theory, right, that a lot of children disappear and thousands every year, they just vanish. Now, of course, we'd say, well, they go missing, they get kidnapped, all those things. But now this book takes a different perspective on it and says, well, what if some of those children are abducted and taken to another planet? We wouldn't even know. And this book follows a boy named John who's 16, and his father disappeared years earlier. And he one day wakes up with this big black mark on his arm, a symbol. He doesn't know what it means. And essentially things start getting very weird. And a few days later, he just wakes up on a different planet altogether. And it turns out he's been abducted. And of course, he has no idea what's going on. And he stumbles around in this planet and he comes across this camp of children who all have marks on their arms, but they're different colors. And he finds out they all mean different things. And it's essentially you're abducted for something you're really good at. So the green marker means most of these characters are abducted from third world countries and they're really good at surviving in the wild or interacting with animals. And then you get the blue marks who are exceptionally smart. You get the red marks who are very strong. Now, John has a black mark, and he's the only one there who has a black mark, and he doesn't know what it means. Now, John is very much similar to how I was in high school. Now, the thing is, John's character isn't meant to be the most likable character, but his attribute isn't necessarily a bad one, and the whole story follows John and, of course, the children who want to get off this planet and get home, because some of them are as young as toddlers, and spoiler, they don't necessarily survive. This isn't that sort of story. It's very realistic. Because this is like a wilderness planet full of beasts and things that go bump in the night, and they don't know what is going on. And so John is written from my perspective, from a 17-year-old, and it's difficult because you from the beginning you sort of need to like John and you need to like the way he acts in certain situations, but you also need to see that he's very flawed as a person. Now, of course, this leads to the end of the story, which I can't spoil, where he finally discovers what his mark means and why it's such a great mark to have. At least, yeah, that's the sort of the conclusion you have to make. But so that's what makes this really difficult, because I want to change things John says, because sometimes it irritates me, because it's a little bit, he's a little bit, he gets irritated too easily when his friends,
Rude.
play rough with him, or he shrugs people off a bit. He gets tired of school, and I think, well, that's irritating. I don't want my protagonist to be that irritating. But then I recall when I was 17, that's exactly how I was, and I actually thought this is a really cool attribute to have, because most teenagers are actually quite like this, and they actually would relate to a character that's a little bit fed up with things. He's a bit bored of school, and and then things just get more difficult, and he gets abducted. So that's where I have to draw back and say, well, you know what, Tia, 17-year-old you thought this was really a great representation of a lot of teenagers this age. It's a bit of an awkward phase, and I need to just leave it be and allow the teenagers to decide whether they think so or not. I probably will get my sister to read it, who's 18. Maybe she has a better idea of what teenagers are like.
All right, that's a good way. That's a good insurance. I like the trust, saying, okay, this character kind of irritates me. I need him to be kind of irritating though, but he's also designed for a slightly different audience. So maybe they'll irritate him less, or maybe they'll relate more. Then you can also get, of course, solicit feedback from somebody around the age. Double check that, hey, this seems to be aligned with what someone 17, 18 will say. Like
yes,
that.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm with you. So,
yeah, we need to get this book published.
Yeah,
it's
no,
time.
You got this. I know you do.
Time. Yeah, I can't change it forever, right? Otherwise, I'll be 40 and just lose touch with my target audience, which isn't a good thing.
No, that's, I think, one of the tough parts about any like long-term ambitious goals. There's a point where at the end you're so close, but you can get burnt out or distracted by other things, because you are a very busy person, as we talked about last time. Student, you best, you author, streamer. I feel like I'm missing more. What else am I missing here? Boom, boom, boom. I think the most Gwent casting you cast.
Pretty much, yeah.
You have a lot of balls up in the air you're juggling around, trying to make sure everything, or like, I always like the balloon analogy best, where it's just like you have a bunch of balloons and they're all floating. You're trying to grab the ones from floating away. It's like you get, pull down your studies, you're keeping in grasp, and all of a sudden you see streaming running away. You run over, grab streaming, and nothing else is going.
Yes,
it is crazy. Give you a lot of credit. Are there any novels that inspired this or helped you, like, are authors you really look to when trying to think of this? Because you were 17 at the time writing this initially, so I find that to be an interesting part to try to find where you're getting, what authors you're looking up to as you're jotting down your ideas.
Well, back in the day, there was a very clear trend of what was popular, and it was regarding dystopian novels. So I initially already had the idea in mind before I made it more consumer friendly, let's put it like that. So first, the idea was to have only one boy getting abducted, and it was going to be a short story for one of my essays, and it was a competition that was going to take place, and the competition never took place. And I thought, well, I really, really like this story. I should still write it. And then I thought, you know what, Tia, you're reaching that age where you can just as well write a book. Spoiler, you can't. At 17, it's a good place to start, though. Nothing's stopping you from starting. You need the first draft. But yeah, that's when I started writing the book, and that's when The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and Divergent were really popular, and they all followed a very similar sort of pattern, which is have a bunch of teenagers, because that sells. And I thought, you know what, that could actually work. Instead of John, just the character's name's John, by the way.
Yep, no, instead of that, I'm saying it's named
John
after me. I'm just kidding. We don't.
It's a good name. It's a solid name.
Solid name.
Yeah. He, instead of one guy getting abducted, what about giving him a mark that means something, and bringing in a whole group of teenagers and place them into categories, because that is something that we love. We don't know why we love them, but we love them. Harry Potter, we love the fact that there are different schools, and people obsess over what not schools, different it's not a faction. What is it called again? Your house. Yeah, they're different houses. Yeah, and then you have, well, The Hunger Games didn't have groups, but Divergent did, for example. Divergent had groups, and people will constantly wonder what group am I?
Districts and Hunger Games,
they really like that sort of thing, and I thought, well, I think I could really make a relatable sort of thing here with the marks. Unique, but you know, following a definite point that sells, which is getting a bunch of teenagers together and giving them marks.
No, I think.
Yeah, and so you know what, but like one of the books that really did inspire me was the concept of Lord of the Flies. I don't know if you've read it.
So I have read it, and it's actually on my notes because you talked about Lord of the Flies being a book you really like, and the id, ego, and super ego of it. So if you want to delve down this path, I'm more than happy to walk down the Lord of the Flies. It's been a while, so you might have to remind me here and there. I remember Piggy and Friends.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. For those of you who didn't read Lord of the Flies, I think it's an excellent book. Because what happens is a group of children. Now these are children. They get stranded on an island, and quickly they become very, very barbaric, and essentially some of them start dying at the hands of others. Now, I like this because it's children. I don't know how adults would react, but I think it would be very similar because of the Freudian id, ego, and superego, which we can totally delve into after this if you'd like.
Sure.
And the point is, the moment you take children who haven't yet quite developed completely, because in children, the id, the most primal part of you, is still very much active. And, you know, if you leave children alone, they will start killing each other. And any parent will know this. You have to teach your child not to punch others. You have to teach your child to share. It's not ingrained in them. They're still very much little animals running around. And when left alone, Lord of the Flies show exactly what happens. Now, of course, it's not a true story, but it's a great way of explaining it. So I quite like that. And I thought, you know what, I can totally sort of see how that goes hand in hand with my book, but on another planet. Because let's just say there's this group they speak of on my planet called the Feral. Now, John finds a camp where they have pretty much structure in place. They have a leader, they have people doing their tasks. You know, the children aren't all great, but they get along.
Yeah.
And you start hearing rumors of the feral children. And now feral is what they're called, but feral children are actually a real phenomenon on Earth. You name a child a feral child if he grew up in the wild without parents, like Mowgli, you know, feral children. And they do exist, unfortunately. But anyway, so we start speaking of this group of feral children who don't really show themselves. And it's like the children who can't handle it all, they end up as feral children. And it's just a rumor, and whether they exist or not is yet to be seen. But the feral children essentially would be the id just going crazy. It would be children who seriously can't handle not having authority, not having adult supervision, just running off into the wild and you know, taking it from there. And that's where things get very complicated. And I try to replicate a real life scenario as best I could, and that's the reason it's science fiction, because it needs to be a possibility. I thought, what would children really do? And what would happen if you get those really, really bad apples? You know, like all schools have bullies, and some bullies go ahead and, you know, they would assault other students. This is something that happens. Now, what would happen if those are left unchecked on another planet? And Lord of the Flies showed us children, but what if we go a step further and give them real teenagers who are capable of thinking outside the box, like really evil children? What would they do? And that's sort of also one of the aspects that our character has to deal with on this other planet. And it gets very dark at some points, but it's essentially my theory of what children are capable of when there aren't adult supervision.
No, it's an interesting time, right? Because Lord of the Flies, as you mentioned, it's a bunch of, you know, grim, happy kids, but washed ashore, but they're young, right? That they're impulsive. And it's not that adults aren't capable of killing themselves, but you're taking a bunch of kids that are relatively innocent and you're just breaking them. And they're fighting each other, killing each other. It's a lovely story. It's a good read. You should check out Lord of the Flies if you've not read it. But I like how you took the idea of saying, okay, what about if we took some more developed people, teenagers, which could go one of two ways. There is a bit more of ego, which, you know, forethought and planning out how you're going to get your wants and needs, and maybe even a bit of super ego, wondering about your morality, what is right, what is wrong. You're starting to get these kinds of thoughts. What happens if you put a wide range of ages, with teenagers at the top, who have some capabilities, might not be fully there, and let them go on the planet? Some will break, some won't. Will some get greedy? Will some be generous? At this point, they're a bit more formed up here, a bit less id, more ego to control, a little bit super ego. It's interesting. It's a fun way to split it up. And you're right, by the way.
Exactly.
The houses are super fun. I still find the housing concept of like, oh, these are these people, these are these. These people are gonna excel at this and this.
Exactly.
Super fun.
It's
Mhm.
such it's interesting because I still wonder why. I think it's a very human trait to want to divide yourself into a group, find your people. But it sells like crazy, you know. If you get people to really get attached to a certain thing, a mark, if you will. Hey, and you know what they also followed in a lot of these books? They made it possible in for a real child to get that mark in the real world, you know. So I'm describing it very poorly, but let's say it should be possible for you as a child to get a letter in the mail and figure out you're going to Hogwarts. You know, you don't have to be this magical alien with superpowers. It's like you have the potential to actually go to this thing, and this might happen. So that's why these things do so well. Like Narnia, you just climb into your closet and you go into this new world. You know, it could happen to you. So I found that to be even more compelling, and I think that's why Harry Potter did so well. And that's also why mine is set in the real world. Like, you get chosen for something some extraterrestrial species finds really peculiar or really worthwhile. And they watch us all the time, and then one day this child wakes up with a mark on his arm. And now you get children who think, wow, I want to wake up with a green mark one day, and it could happen to me, you know. And that means I'm really good at surviving in the wild, and I'm good with animals, and you want them to sort of see them. This one is very primal, by the way. It's not it's supposed to be like, if an extraterrestrial species looked down on us, what would they divide us into? And I think it would be very, very primal things, you know. That's why it's just strong, and it's intelligent, and it's, you know, good with animals, and it's supposed to be a very primal thing, and not like Hogwarts where every house has a set list of things you need to be good at. It's a lot more primal than that, which is also a lot more sellable. You know, it sells. It's easy to remember. Color goes with attributes, and you know, children at that age are normally quickly able to put themselves in a group like that. Am I strong, intelligent? Am I a bit of an outcast who likes to be in the forest alone? You know, there are more colors, by the way. I just can't tell you about
it's good.
them.
You gotta keep some secrets. You can't spoil the whole book.
Yeah, there's some weird colors.
I look forward to seeing it or reading it. I think it's so interesting how people like that categorization, because we see it also in the real world, modern day, in tabloids with horoscopes, right? We all love I was born in this month or this range, and like I'm a Leo, and so I'm really brave and tough. And I still feel like they love it. And I feel like, by the way, for the record, I definitely got shorted there. Like, cancer, come on, really? No one got smallpox. Nobody got bubonic plague.
True. I'm so sorry for your loss.
There's just a person who gets a crab and they call it cancer. Like, come on. Anyways, long-standing grudge. Come on, like, or at least like make April smallpox and make me a bit more redeemed.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Maybe you can redeem yourself with your next child.
Maybe, you know, well, not next child. There's no next child. They're in first child. That would be a huge spoiler. All of a sudden, I'd be like, a what? I would not be streaming.
Speculations.
Like, you know, the mythos. Maybe John has a strange child. A plot twist. Anyways.
Oh my goodness.
But I think there is something very human about loving the categorization. Also, loving being assigned things. Weirdly enough, like just like kind of going to a workplace and being told you're going to do this job, and finding structure there. Being told you're the brave one. Your job's to stand up and be courageous. You are Gryffindor. You know, you're the bold one based on when you were born, or you think you might be bold or have some positive trait based on your Leo. You're the brave one. You're gonna be great. Like whatever it is. But people love that, and they relate to that. And I think it's cool that you're taking advantage of that, putting it into your book, but also taking your own twist on it, making it more primal and raw. And
well, of course, I can't just parrot things that already exist. It still needs a story, right? That's the main thing. That the marks are merely an element in the story, but it's like you said. I totally agree with you. Like, having a role in society is so valued. It's, you know, and I know Jordan Peterson speaks of this a lot, but like one of the best things of being a student is being able to call yourself a student. You're not yet expected to work. Nothing else is expected of you. You are told what to do. You know, it's really a privilege being able to just say, well, you know, this is what is expected of me. This is what I have to do the next few years. and you sort of don't have to leave that bubble just yet. But once you do, you're all on your own. You know, a lot of people struggle with this. Suddenly, nobody's telling you what to do anymore. You have to
Yes.
decide for yourself, or am I going to work now? Am I going to do this? Ooh, I need authority. I need guidance. Like, we seek that as humans. We seek it so much. But yeah, that's just one of those things. If someone can just come from above and tell us exactly what we're meant to do, you know, it would help so much with existential angst. But yeah, so just being divided into a house and a school, being told exactly what you are, that seems like the greatest thing ever.
Yes, it definitely gives you that obvious guidance on how to succeed. And I find that in life, going off of that, the 2 times I've seen people break when they're young and break hard was to jump from high school to college, at least in the United States, right? You go from a very structured school to classes just to make sure you're 10, you're on a campus, you're probably without your parents in most cases. Some people are able to live at home, but most people go on a campus, get, you know, rent a dorm room. There they are. Likewise, after college is another point where I see people break. Both times you're getting a lot of freedom that you haven't had before, and the structure is starting to disappear. And some people just shatter. Their pride doesn't hold up. If you go to an elite school, all of a sudden if you're an elite, you've had an easy time in schooling. You go to an elite school, all of a sudden you're average. That's humbling, and now you have more freedom. Now you have to deal with your pride being wounded by being average all of a sudden at your elite school, because it's all relative, and you have more freedom and you just botch it. Likewise, you leave, you go into the real world, and maybe you don't find that career you want. Maybe you don't even know what you want to do, but the structure is gone. You just have to find a job, sell your labor, see what happens next. It gets messy, that paradox of freedom.
Yes. I mean, we need structure. As humans, we absolutely need structure. And you're totally right. I recall having to go from high school myself to university. You have the option of going into a residence where we call residences where the students all live. So it's very much like well, it's I don't know what the English term is, but it's where all the children have rooms, and you know, you have someone in charge of the house,
Yeah,
and
you're
there
looking
are
for a
rules in place.
dorm is the
Yeah,
place, and
yeah,
usually RA,
dormitory.
the thing stands for residential advisor, is the person in charge of the place.
Okay, yeah, so it's a dormitory, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have dorms, and a lot of people normally try to get into them, but after high school, I was so sick of all that, and I knew it's not easy to get in, you know, to go on your own. And I thought, you know what, yeah, you have to tackle this sooner or later. And I just decided I'm not going into the dormitory. Because I realized this is just a crutch for many. They need that structure. They need to be told when to go to bed. They need to have it. They're not allowed to bring alcohol in, all that jazz. Where I thought, no, I'm gonna have my own flat, sort of. It was in a student house, so there were still other students. I went into my own flat the second year. It was really, really tough. Like, I can't, you know, overstate this enough. It was very tough suddenly being on your own, and because you're also not forced to have social interaction anymore. You're not in a setting where there are constantly people around you. You can just sit in your room, in your apartment. Nobody will bother you, which at first was amazing, and then it wasn't.
Yes.
So that's when I started streaming, and I also got 3 cats. Whether that's correlation or causation is left for my psychoanalyst in years to come. my therapist can figure that out one day. But no, it wasn't easy. But I mean, because of that, I now had the freedom to pursue things like writing, streaming, casting. None of that would have happened if I was in a dormitory. I wouldn't have streamed. I wouldn't have done any of those things, because you just hang out with people all the time, follow the structure, do your work. You're sort of in that little block. Maybe do some sports. It's not bad. Some people do need it. This is a very subjective thing, you know. Everybody goes about things in their own pace. But I decided right after school that I was done with the structure, and I needed to create my own. And it took 3 years. And I hear the 20s are apparently when you're supposed to figure this out. So luckily this isn't just an individual experience. But yeah, building your own structure is so important, because yeah, if you lack structure, you just fall to pieces eventually.
Yeah, and also I think challenging yourself, right? You said, you know what, I can take on the independence. I'm going to do the flat. And then you found out, hey, you know what? It sounds like you got a little lonely, right? I mentioned that being alone in your room was not your jam. So, hey, that's not my style. I now learned that. Let me get a couple cats, or which maybe I've always wanted that. Maybe I'm using this as an excuse, or maybe this is a solution. Let me do streaming, which is a social way of interacting with people. It is new age. It's a little different. Some parts are very social, some parts are not so social, but it is you chatting with people in chat. Helps ease that a little bit. And you got to this because you took a risk saying, I'm ready to push myself. And likewise, if you're watching this and that might not be the battle for you, maybe you're already ready to be independent, but you struggle with academics. Maybe you say, I'm going to take a really structured dormitory where lights out are a certain time, there's no alcohol, so that I can try to up my risk in academia, take on harder classes. Everyone picks that, but it sounds like you knew yourself. You knew where the chance, where you wanted to grow, take a risk, and you took it, and now all of a sudden, you start chaining things, right? Okay, so you have a novel you're writing, and all of a sudden you chain it into university, get a flat, and all of a sudden now you're streaming, and now you're finding out about the novel somewhere in this, that, hey, it's really hard to get a publisher because there's too many people, not enough ones, they're going for safe bets, not risky ones. Oh, look, because of all these choices, you have a streaming audience that can give you a leg up if you self-publish. You can give it to the people that care about you. I love that. It's all just a lot of chain reaction of taking risk in one area and chance in one area, chaining into a variety of other things that support other things you're interested in. Now you have an audience for your book. This all happened because you eventually said, you know what, I'm gonna take the dorm. I'm gonna get a flat instead of being in a very structured dorm. That's amazing, right? It says a lot about risk taking.
Certainly, and like you said, it's like everyone for each their own. Everybody knows what they want to do. You know, some people genuinely just want to go from high school to college. You know, get into a relationship. That's their next sort of structure. Get very dependent on that, but that's a different story. I've thought, you know, if you can sort of first figure out how to be alone, then you can take on anything, because then you've got nothing to lose. Again, it wasn't an easy thing to do, especially since I was head girl in my high school, which was a democratic process. So, like, I had quite a few friends in high school, and they sort of seemed to at least like my personality enough to give me you know, a badge that gives me authority over them, which was interesting to say the least.
It's good.
It was a very interesting experience. Like, I learned so much, but more with my interaction with teachers than anything. That's a different story, because they didn't like the authority because they had no control over who got to be elected because it's a democratic process.
Interesting.
I was a bit of a not your typical Afrikaans head girl, to say the least. So I would question the system and I would do what I thought was right. And you know, they wanted the submissive female character as head girl, which is Afrikaans culture still. So I'm not the silent girl type, if you can tell.
Well, yeah, you're bold. So you're willing to take risks. You know, went into a flat by yourself. You found a way for the schooling system. But that must have been What was that backlash like, though? So it sounds like you got to this position of power. If you don't mind me dwelling here a little longer, got to a position of power, elected. And in the United States, it's really not a big deal to be elected. I mean, it's nice. It goes on your resume, but you don't really do anything with it. But it sounds like you might not even be supposed to be a big deal in South Africa. Like, it sounds like they're looking for a stereotype, a submissive female who's gonna say some nice words and here, there, and not do much else. Be a bit of a figurehead. It sounds like you really kind of flipped it. Tried to take a bit of power, push a bit of change. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can. A backdrop of Afrikaans cultures. We're very normally. It's still very much based on Christianity and all that, and it's also what's the word? I always forget this word. It's conservative. It's a very conservative culture. Now, of course, not all Afrikaans people are like this, and the majority of the new generation is totally opposite to this. But you've still got those older teachers in control, and so because I wasn't your normal head girl, you know, I firmly did what was right always, no matter what, and that wasn't always good. You know, so if there was a bully, I'd make sure that bully was put in his place through authority figures, and I would, you know, that's normally the head boy's job, but I had to, you know, do that every now and then, and you know, if a teacher was very corrupt and wasn't treating students right, now a normal head girl would 100% not question an authority figure. You know, you'd keep quiet and you'd just smile and get good marks. But yeah, I would obviously not allow that to happen and stand up for students who have really gone through hell because of certain teachers. And obviously that wouldn't place me in a good light, because it makes you look rebellious. You know, questioning your culture is quite something. So, I mean, it was tough, more in a sense that it constantly tested my character because I knew what was right and what wasn't. And you know, I did this all with respect. You know, I didn't like burn down things and went around screaming, tearing off my uniform. It was all done very much as professional as possible. You know, still respecting the authority figures, doing everything in my power to retain that image, at least to the people outside of the school, because it's about upholding your school's image at the end of the day. But it was certainly one of the most difficult experiences I have undergone my entire life, to put it like that.
That sounds very tough because you're not only shaking up the school, but shaking up the culture itself. What kind of backlash did you face along the way? Was it, did any teachers like mark you down negatively on grades? Was there? Tell me about this. Was it just fear of repercussion?
No. So the now, like, here we had to, like, we actually did well, in our culture the head girl and head boy does do a lot of work, and we work really hard, so that adds on to the stress. But we also give like almost weekly speeches. We'll give speeches in front of the school. We have to, you know, uphold the values and all that. But yeah, we've got a lot of teachers, like in most schools, who, you know, they aren't exactly the pinnacle of what you'd want from a good moral teacher. And so the teachers who are problematic would take out their frustrations on me in very immoral ways, like sending me out of the classroom for no reason, making me miss maths lessons so I'd fall behind, you know, purposely locking the door every time I was a minute late after lunch because I had meetings. You know, it was quite, some of it more sadistic than anything. But yeah, like right before my final exams in matric, which is 12th year, they, like, the one teacher would, you know, call me out on stage for no reason at all. And now, obviously, I was really tough in high school. Like, I had this big barrier that was locked my empathy inside. And I know now it was a coping mechanism and a defense strategy, or else I wouldn't have survived. But that's also the reason I sort of cracked down after high school, because in my little safe apartment, I got to reflect on what I really went through. And it was quite harsh for someone my age because, yeah, like I said, you had these authority figures who are totally in control, and they just abused their power as much as they could to make my life hell. So right before my science exam, the one walked past me and said, well, he hopes I fail, which is like, that's not something a teacher should ever tell a student. No. Certainly an innocent student who did nothing to deserve that. You know, because it's a sort of a weird situation, because you're not being paid to work for the school, yet you're working so hard for them. You don't get thanked for that. It's a thankless job, and you know that, and that's where you go into it. Unless you're there purely for clout and you fill that head girl position, you do everything they want you to do. You know, you do it and you get the attention you desire. But if you really do it for the right reasons, it's a lot of work. And like I said, so it felt like I was being punished for no reason at all. And yeah, it's just all of these things where they sort of rattled you, like this guy, you know, rattling you right before your exams that determine if you get into university. And, you know, of course, your concentration is just gone for the next 3 hours, because as a young student, you're thinking of, wow, this authority figure just told me, who I thought was a nice guy, that he hopes I fail out of the blue, which is extreme, right? But I have thousands of such stories. It's truly, I won't say it's the majority, it's a minority, and all schools have them. But I unfortunately got to get into contact with them on a more personal basis. And yeah, it's also how I made my theory that you get two types of teachers. I don't think you get neutral teachers. I think you get a lot of people who come in as neutral, but they will eventually fall to one side or the other. You get two types, and both of them have this in common. Both of them know that children are the most innocent, defenseless individuals in society. Now you get one who chooses to take that chance and protect, shape, you know, give these children everything they can to grow up into strong, independent adults with the best education they possibly can. And then you get the types who go in to purposely exploit them. Types who maybe didn't have a nice high school experience of their own. They were maybe bullied. They can't really they can't really get along with people their own age necessarily, or they're still being bullied, and they decide, well, I'll go into an environment where I am the authority figure without question.
Mm-hmm.
And like this could just be a neutral thing, but eventually you get fed up and you start sort of slacking. And the thing is, when a teacher slacks, it can have lasting effects on the child, because it can be a bad comment. You might not even be thinking really. You might sort of like say to the child, well, you're doing really badly right now, and I think you should try harder, or else you're just not going to make it. Just a fed up comment like that sticks with the child. And then you get the really vindictive types who are really just bullying, and their sole purpose there is to be the big authority figure that can't be questioned. And they take advantage of the fact that these individuals are the weakest members of society, and they can do nothing to question that authority. Now, I didn't fall into that category, and they didn't like that, and it made me the bigger target, of course. So but I'd rather be the target than have someone else be the target. And if I could somehow have made a difference there with the little bit of waves I made, the fact that those teachers went on to do the same thing with children after me when I was out of the school, perhaps that would have sort of made the point clear that these are problematic individuals who shouldn't be left alone near children.
Yes. No, it sounds like you stood up to the plate when it was not, they were not expecting it, but there was definitely a need for it, right? You saw this minority of teachers who were there for the wrong reason. They weren't there to try to nurture the next generation, guide them, teach them. They were there neutral because they wanted that authority. They thought maybe it was a simple job, and then they just abused that position. And it became, if a kid broke along the way, like, not a big deal. It's just for them. They're in charge. Nothing really can go wrong for them. But you were calling them out. You started getting that target on your back and taking, having teachers who, even some of them that you thought might like you or support you, telling you, hey, I hope you fail your exam that I'm about to give that determines your entire future. Particularly in South Africa, has a really strict and difficult system for university, and university is a key part to financial success in the future, right? So it's not a small little wish here. It's I really hope you fail life kind of a deal. That is
it's
brutal.
big. It's almost evil, I'd say.
I would call it evil.
I would call it evil too. Yeah, people's idea of evil definitely differs. Obviously, you don't want to be that person calling everyone evil. It sound like that maniac who's in a cult.
I think you sound like you have a good line here.
Yeah, evil definitely, comes forth more often than we'd like to acknowledge. It's you don't necessarily notice it, but small things like that is certainly evil. Wishing that upon a student you're responsible for is really, really an innocent student. And like, again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's not like I was this rebellious teen running around doing bad things, just creating trouble. It's more like if a teacher was clearly doing something very, very wrong, and this happened once or twice to a student, the student comes to me because I am the authority figure for them, and I'm the direct contact with the head principal. So I'm left with the position of having to stand up for someone. Now, again, the submissive traditional head girl does nothing here. It's simply it's simple as that. You sort of yes, they're there, it's gonna be okay, and you try and make the student feel better, but you don't do anything about it. I, of course, can't ever allow that to happen. So I'm the one who has to sort of try and sort this out somehow. Now, it's not like I go running to the principal and say, hey, this teacher did this. I have to do the most diplomatic thing I can. And like I said, it was a really respectable way of doing things as well, which made it so much worse that they just freaked out that the head girl did this. So I think at least I rattled some feathers in terms of what our culture expects of females. Hopefully I made it easier for those who came after me in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, the head boy certainly did the same. He was, again, the opposite of head boy. He was a lot less manly than they would have liked. The head boy in our society is normally like this big rugby player, and he's like, he's really like the alpha guy in our school. Now, this head boy was more like the most intelligent head boy. So he was there because he got the best marks, and he was not as manly as the other boys. But he's respectable in terms of his intelligence, and he was really hardworking. So that also ruffled feathers, believe me. And it's also one of the reasons I often did things that the head boy normally would have done, which is like tackling bullying situations, which was not fun because it's really big guys, like assaulting other guys. The other guys do nothing about it because if they say something, they will get assaulted again. And yes, they just got assaulted, and nothing was ever done about it. And then I'm the one I need to intervene and talk to the bully. And if the bully doesn't stop, I need to take it way further and quickly like put an end to it. And the thing is, I knew because in our culture you don't assault a female, so I can get away with doing that. But it still made me very unpopular amongst certain students, which I could have avoided by just ignoring it, of course. Before that I was quite popular in a sense, not in the high school sense, like I'm the one partying every night. It's more like in the I'll stand up for you and I'll really make sure you get treated right. But yeah, I lost that support from some people who definitely were out of line in terms of how they treated their fellow human beings. But I put an end to it, so that was good.
That was good. And that's, I guess, tough part of the democratic system at school. Hey, if I stand up to stop people are out of line, those people aren't going to vote for me. They aren't going to support me. Maybe even go as far as to undermine me. Seek conflict and disruption. Tough part. The paradox of a democratic system for this kind of schooling. But culture seems to be very much entangled here. That tough part about, hey, here are the norms for that structure, and everyone likes having structure. But then it's a two-way street, right? Culture defines us, but we define the culture. And should the culture be how it is, right? In this case, it sounds like you and the head boy were able to disrupt the culture a bit. One was more intellectual. You were more fierce, I think it might be the right word, fiercer than the standard.
They called me Beast. That's how I got my Twitch nickname.
Is it really? That's how you got your Twitch name?
Yeah, it's because I was very, very athletically involved. So I was playing hockey, and I was like, ready to go. So I was obviously more like the alpha female. I'm not saying I was buff, but like I had a very, very thick skin in high school. And again, that just fell away after high school, which is really interesting for me. I find that that's a really intriguing psychological process. I'd like to study one day. It's like going into a safe space. Actually, I'll add on to that. I did my first actual study. It's a small study, but for my university for psychology. And we looked at the mental health of doctors in the era of COVID-19, which was really, really interesting. Yeah. Of course, not good. But what they found was doctors in quarantine were twice as likely to develop PTSD than normal citizens, which was really interesting because it sort of suggests that, doctors go through hell, but the moment they're alone and quarantined and not around people, that's when things like PTSD are prone to develop. And I found that so interesting, that it's when you're taken out of your environment and you're suddenly, perhaps it's because you're left alone with your thoughts and you can process them, or perhaps your brain takes down that defense mechanism, that barrier that sort of switches you off, and it sort of allows you to deal with these subconscious thoughts slowly but surely. And that's how PTSD perhaps develops. That's just a theory, but it was found that one of the biggest risk factors for doctors was being quarantined, because their mental health just cracked under quarantine, which is really interesting. So when I say quarantine, I mean doctors who are working during COVID and they get in contact with someone who has COVID, so they're forced to isolate for 2 weeks. That's when they are more likely to develop PTSD, which is really interesting because that's almost exactly what happened to me after high school. When I was alone, I sort of almost also cracked, and it just out of nowhere. And I realized because you start to process what happened, and like that's not all right. A teacher telling you to fail, that's not cool. But under the circumstances, I was more thick-skinned, and I got through it. I was like, it's like just rub it off. You just go on. You have the job to do. Yeah, but it's a really interesting concept.
Is there not a name for that? I feel like that, at least in my personal experience, is very natural. The moment where you're finally alone, you get your thoughts, you're not in motion, you're not trying to have complete a task, you're just done, you're alone with your thoughts. especially if you're in like a safe and calm place, you know,
Mm.
your mind naturally goes back to what's disturbing you. It wants to dwell on it, think about it, process it. And sometimes you're like, oh gosh, I'm really a bit angry about that, or that made me really uncomfortable, or I'm upset. And I was in the moment then, but now I'm really reflecting on it. It's awful. I'm surprised.
Mm.
I feel like, at least from my personal experience, I feel that it's a natural thing.
I'd say so too, but I can't, like, I haven't been told a psychological term for this, but yeah, it's true that, I mean, it's well known, like, you know, like right before you go to sleep, some people are prone to be on their phones because they don't want to deal with those thoughts. And some people constantly need to be with other people because they can't be left alone to deal with their thoughts. It's very true. It's interesting how we sort of try and stay away from the thoughts and how the brain protects us, and it also takes you back to dreams, and it's super interesting what our own brain is capable of hiding from us. It's just the most interesting thing for me is what you know but you can't access. It's also like forgetting a word. It's those simple things. You know the word, but you can't access it immediately, and you'll sometimes 5 hours later you'll be like, the word. Now, I mean, it's not like you suddenly learned the word. It was in your storage, it was in your memory, but for some reason you couldn't access it at the exact moment. And it's so interesting how your brain actively protects you. So, now, this isn't with the word, but your brain actively protects you against your own thoughts sometimes. And that's why some people have childhood traumas that they only discover through therapy, because it's so well hidden away from you that you're not able to access it consciously.
No, I think it's so interesting. That theme repeats a lot. A recent example that comes to my mind, and get nerdy, there's a manga, soon to be an anime called Chainsaw Man, and you're following this boy who's barely human. Speaking of feral child, great example. And he's
Oh
on a
yeah.
path to slowly like become a human being, with moving from ego, or from just id to ego, navigating this all. And throughout the entire plot, there's this moment where there's this door, and it's in his subconscious, and he has a friend who's technically a part of him. It's complicated. That's that manga anime-esque thing. But basically, it constantly said, do not, under any circumstance, open this door. You just do not open the door. And the entire manga is just him doing stuff. Eventually, you know, he's sleeping. The door appears, and there's a voice. I think his name's Denji, something like that. Genji, do not open the door. The entire plot is this hanging mystery, because there's that bit of ourselves that we don't want to open. If you open it, something bad's going to happen. You're going to have to confront thoughts or realities that you are not prepared to as an individual. And when you're alone, vulnerable, mind starts to wander. You find yourself at whatever your door is, that hidden fear, that frustration. It's brutal. And
It is.
please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. It's I mean, like I finally got to study like Freud this year, which was really cool. And they were constantly, because Freud was like one of the father of psychology in a way, because he was the first to address the fact that, you know, there's things going on in your mind that you're not aware of, and it affects the way you think and feel, you know. And he, like, just talk therapy, he's responsible for that, you know, where you just talk to the therapist. It's one of the most common therapies, actually, is because people just sort of start talking and talking, and you start thinking about the next thought, and you almost always sort of access deeper thoughts as you go along without even realizing it, and super effective. But yeah, the subconscious, he and I can't recall the other one. Well, I'll shoot myself in the foot for that. But he was working along with someone else, and they were trying to figure out how we could make the individual deal with the subconscious, because they found knowing wasn't enough. Because this is where the id comes in again, because right, the id is your subconscious mostly. Well, it's all subconscious, but your subconscious goes up a little bit higher as well. It's not just in the id, but the id is sort of where all those deep dark things lie that you can't deal with right now or never. And they found that in order to help their patients, they sort of had to, you know, tackle these things. And they found that hypnotizing them was a great way to sort of get that barrier away forcibly. And they'd let the patient sort of talk about it. But the problem was, after hypnosis, the patient wouldn't recall the conversation. And then hypnosis is a real thing, by the way. I'm sure you know, but hypnosis is a true way of getting info out of people. It's quite dangerous actually, because they're in a very vulnerable state, and very suggestive comments and stuff can really influence a person under that state of mind. It's quite dangerous actually if you just give yourself over to someone like that. But it's not like it would be in the movies. You can't just forcibly hypnotize someone. It's more of getting them into a deeper state of sleep almost, and starting to talk to them. But so they get to the root of the problem. The patient would wake up and they tell the patient, oh well, here's your problem. And it was found that wasn't good enough, because the patient had to deal with it himself. And they found that dreams was almost the next best thing, because in dreams you don't even have to use hypnosis. That barrier automatically goes away, and all those deep subconscious things sort of pop up in your dreams. And the patients remember dreams as well, so they started doing dream analysis, and Freud is majorly responsible for dream analysis merely because of that. But just an interesting way of trying to access those deep inner thoughts. They are often very much hidden from you, even though you'd very much like to access them.
Yes, no, they're buried, and trying to figure out what's going on, whether it's right as you're drifting asleep, hypnosis, I'm being told about later, whatever method you try and works for you. It's interesting. There's a lot our conscious mind's just getting day by day, as it manages the id, ego, and superego, just shoves away to try to make each of those balance out in the end. I often think of, is it yoga? It's yoga nidra. That the idea of trying to get yourself very close to that falling asleep state, so you can try to self reprogram effectively.
What was the word you said before that?
Yoga nidra. You know what? Give me a hot second. I know this. It's on my list of things to look into. Because it came up in Healthy Gamer GG, also known as Dr. K, had mentioned it. Give me a second. It is.
Yeah, maybe if you could spell it out.
Yoga nidra. It's yoga nidra. Nidra. And it's a type of meditation where you're trying to get yourself to this state where you are right on the cusp of falling asleep. You're super relaxed, and then trying to make a mantra that you're trying to change something about yourself. Exercise makes me happy. I find satisfying eating salads. Whatever it is, whatever you're looking for. I'm more confident. I'm confident around people, and you're just trying to very much nudge yourself in a direction. Is my limited understanding. Still looking into researching it because it sounds super cool. But
it's interesting. Well, I think it's merely the goal of it that changes it from what you'd normally find, because anything related to consciousness and going to sleep, that very, very nice area, that's where people start talking about lucid dreaming, astral projection, all that weird things. It's always about getting the body to go to sleep, but the mind to stay awake. Which is a possible thing, by the way. Yes. That is lucid dreaming, essentially, which is a real thing.
Well documented.
Yeah. Lucid dreaming is, yes. Astral projection is more theoretical speculation of the spiritual. It's nothing proven, unfortunately. But so this would merely be that, except the whole goal is to start using that sort of state of awareness to get yourself to feel certain things, But at the end of the day, it's nothing new to try and achieve that state of meditation, because most meditation is very much like that. But if you can reach that state and stay awake, then good on you. It's not easy.
Yes, no, it's one of my goals to really learn a meditative technique. I know I used to use Headspace, but it's hard I find it also hard to keep that rhythm going and going and going, because life kind of gets away from you. But simultaneously, so many very successful people meditate all the time. It's a way higher percentage than just the average population. It makes me, as a person with goals and ambitions, pause and saying, wow, all these really successful people like to meditate, really get to chill out on their mind, get to know themselves, experience emotion, whatever meditation they try to pursue. Probably not a good thing that I don't meditate. If I told you, 0.01% of the population eats blueberries, but 25% of successful people eat blueberries, you might say, okay, that could be a coincidence. Or you might say, maybe I should look at blueberries for a little bit. Or looking at eating a
Ye-
few more. And then likewise for
Definitely.
meditation. That makes me that pause, trying to know yourself better.
Mm.
Calm your
Well,
thoughts.
you could always theorize as meditation. Are all successful people eating blueberries because they can suddenly afford blueberries?
Uh-huh.
Or did the blueberry lead up to that? You know, so you could ask, are
Yes.
successful people in a better position to perhaps take time off and pursue meditation? You know, or are they in a better position to say they meditate because it sounds really good? But I would be of the belief that meditation for anyone is better than not meditating. And I always use the excuse, well, you know what, I don't have enough time. You know, I don't have enough time to just sit and do nothing. That I can do that when I'm dead. And then when I did meditate, it always lasts for about a month. But I mean, it's so great when I do it, and it's just a lack of determination, I guess. I need to get back into it, but I would put my timer on for 10 minutes, and you know, just close your eyes and you know, focus on your breathing. And later, I'd feel like my phone perhaps died because the timer isn't going off, and I check and I'd see, wow, I have 4 minutes still left, and it's eerie how slow things go when you're doing nothing at all, and how much time you're actually wasting on social media, because you can totally just sit for 10 minutes a day and meditate, and it will have a drastic effect on your state of mind, and we still don't do it. But yeah, I feel like doing it is half of the, you know, half of it's just getting yourself there is already half of the achievement in itself, and it becomes easier once you do it. Just that let the thoughts come out, you know. You know, hush your environment. You know, a lot of people are afraid of that. Subconsciously, even they don't want to do it because they know they don't want to be alone with their thoughts for that long.
Yes.
Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they should take. Maybe they shouldn't do it yet and take it one step at a time. Hey, who knows what's best for them?
Yeah, and that's up to the person. And sometimes maybe the right choice is, hey, I want to explore my thoughts, but I probably need help. Reach out to a friend, a therapist, whatever, you know, whatever it
Yeah.
is, whoever it is, guidance counselor. You get the support you need to explore some thoughts. You know, get a little bit of faith in yourself. Because sometimes they're overwhelming. And that's the nature of thoughts. It's shoving it down, putting it away. I also think it's interesting how people, myself very much included, have trouble doing things that are good for ourselves, like meditating, eating healthy, exercising. Some people just get it naturally. You look at them like, how do you do that? How do you just naturally get into that state of mind where you're loving it? When I should stretch more. I should do yoga in my house. I take 5 minutes on a YouTube video. I just hate doing it. I find that to be a really interesting, tough paradox of how do you get started doing something you know you're supposed to be doing and not doing it and keeping it going.
So it's so weird. And there's been studies on this where they find people constantly neglect themselves. And they won't do this to a friend, but they'll do it to themselves, which is such an interesting phenomenon, because they'll even have people who they'll go for like a transplant of sorts, you know, a liver transplant or a kidney transplant or whatever they need. And they've been waiting for this for so long, and then they have medication they need to take afterwards so their body doesn't reject it, and they'll just stop taking the medication. And it makes no sense from a logical point of view. It's not like these people are necessarily lazy. It's not like they can't afford it, but they constantly find that people just outright sabotage themselves, their own health, things they deeply care about, and we're sort of just okay with it, which is a weird phenomenon. And I know Jordan Peterson specifically talks about this, where he says you have to treat yourself as if you're someone responsible for caring for. Because we sort of let ourselves go as if it doesn't matter, but you'd never let a family member stop taking their medication. You wouldn't allow it. If you lived with your mother and she had a transplant, you wouldn't allow her to not take her life-saving medication. You would make sure she takes it. Yet we would let ourselves go, or you wouldn't let a family member just sort of not eat for a week, or you know, you'd make sure they're safe and they do what they're supposed to do. But people allow themselves to do it, and you know it's not good for you. And it's odd how we sort of allow ourselves to get away with it. We're sort of alright with, you know, sabotaging our own health a lot of the times. It's a weird phenomenon.
Yeah, that is a weird one. That nature of, and I think all of us, by generalizing the entire human race, have those moments of devaluing ourselves. Maybe it's for other people, and putting them above us, also just devaluing ourselves because we're like, whatever. It is whatever, no big deal. Let's just, it's me. I'm the only one facing the consequences. I don't care. Let's do something. That idea of treating yourself like another person as a way to stimulate caring in oneself is fascinating. Like, oh yeah, I would never let my sibling not brush their teeth. Why would I ever consider skipping it? Because I am like, if I treat myself like, I treat myself with the same amount of care I treat other people, I have to kind of take advantage of empathy, push myself to be my better self, or at least stay on the rough, straight, and narrow. It's an interesting concept. I like it.
Well, I mentioned Jordan Peterson, but it's merely because this goes on. This is his thought that carries on, is the fact that he has an interesting solution to this, which is dividing yourself into an employee and employer, which I quite liked because it goes hand in hand with my theory of mind and body dualism, right? Because I see it more like you have the body is the thing you have, and it's sort of like you have to make sure it's okay, but you're not your body or your mind. So for me, it's like, well, Tia, you have to eat right now because your body's hungry. So there's this clear separation, and it sort of makes it easier for me to take care of myself because it feels less selfish almost. It's like, no, well, I have to care for my body. It's like a thing you have to sort of nurture and make sure it's okay. It has to sleep. It has to go for a jog now. It has to, get that energy out. You need to care for it. Otherwise, it will break down like a car, and the mind will suffer because of it. And well, Jordan has a employee-employer way of thinking, which is like, okay, well, you have to please both of them. The employer needs to push the employee to do work, right? But he can't overwork the employee, or the employee will crack. And the employee needs to please the employer to an extent, but it also can't allow the employer to take advantage of it. So there's this constant sort of, I need sleep, but like the employee wants to sleep, sure, but the employer needs work to be done. Now, you sort of have to negotiate between the two. There needs to be like, there's two aspects. So it's also that sort of dualism, and I sort of like it. It makes things easier when you sort of can negotiate with yourself, as if you're two. It's an interesting concept, but it works. It works.
I think that is wise. I've heard it another way. If you go on, there's a really famous TED Talk about procrastinators and trying to appease your. I think this is the right TED Talk. There is a TED Talk about this, but I think the instant gratification monkey side of yourself while you're trying to work with your nature to actually have to get things done. And the answer is it never all goes away. Man, I hope I remember. I might be mixing up two TED Talks. Whatever. The idea is it's important to not view yourself as I am a robot. I must do what's best for me to excel in all things. There is give and take. There are times where it's time to eat a salad, and there are times when you got to eat a cake or a whole cake. There's got a little bit of give and pull. Sometimes you need to go for that run or a long walk. Sometimes you need to veg out on the couch, sit back, bag of chips, watch television, or whatever your jam is. The give and take in terms of productivity in your mind, your, I guess technically ego, super ego area, and then that id and then that overlap with ego. Sometimes you gotta appease that.
Exactly. I've been overworking the employer side of me has been far too strict for a few years, where I've, like you said, I've had a lot of my plate because employer wants productivity 24/7. It wants you to constantly be producing some kind of work, whereas the employee side of me just gave in and allowed it to happen and then cracked. And now the employee side of me is like, okay, well, I sort of need a break. And employer side is starting to give in and say, well, okay, let's negotiate. You can have time in your day where you do nothing. It's acceptable now. I will allow it. And it's that sort of give and take all the time. It's like, yeah, we want to work hard, but sometimes you can take time off and you can use that time to literally just relax, or else employee will crack. You can't have it both ways. I have to give and take. It's as simple as that.
So for you to come to that conclusion for yourself, was there a particular breaking point? Because I remember, not remember, yesterday I was watching, so one of my vices is food shows about food, food carts, and small businesses selling food, like niche restaurants. That is my jam. That is my favorite thing to waste time doing. Where I'm probably never going to eat any of these restaurants, but I love learning about it and seeing the people. I was watching one where somebody said, oh yeah, worked a full-time job, then I would go to my Italian deli, work 7 hours there, and I would sleep for 6 hours or some degree like that. And I'm thinking, wow, that person's working so much harder than I am. I couldn't do that. I don't think I'm physically able to unless I'm right on the verge of going bankrupt and the alternative is death. I probably could not sustain that or start that, do it, keep it sustainable. You were somebody with a lot of interests, who have a lot of demands on your time. Was there that point where you said, wow, I'm going really, really hard. I'm getting maybe less sleep than I need. Every moment I'm productive, and all of a sudden, hey, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, well, this is probably why I'm more, instead of employee, I have body and I have mind.
Okay.
And I think of consciousness and free will, and then I think of, here's the body who needs to be fed and it needs this and that. It's not that you necessarily want to do it, but you need to do it. That's sort of where I draw the line. Now, yeah, I did essentially crack at some point, which is very interesting. Like in second year of university, when I was so overworked, and I had my first panic attack, which was the weirdest thing, because you remember, this is tough Thea coming out of high school. She knows nothing of this. And I never, the concept of that was always, it sounded like only something weak people dealt with. I couldn't even envision a panic attack. And then I had one, and I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, this is hell, because essentially your body cracks under the stress. It goes from stress to anxiety to the worst, which is panic attack. And then you get panic disorder, which I actually think I might have developed, which isn't good. But essentially your brain constantly forms connections to certain things, right? And I have pushed that line between, working just hard enough and too hard, too much, where it will associate a stressor now immediately with like fight or flight, whereas normally it should just produce a little bit of stress. And so now where I have a little bit of work to do or an assignment or something, instead of just dealing with that, the brain almost instantly goes for panic attack, which isn't good, by the way. I am dealing with that, don't fret. But it's interesting how the body just cracks. The mind is willing, but the body cracks because I haven't treated it well enough. I haven't exercised every day. I haven't had enough social interaction, which is very necessary, because I have work to do. And so now it has reinforced that pathway, which is normally what you need to break. And you need to break that immediate reaction by, well, A, you need to take chill pills, and B, you need to stop overworking yourself. And I did that for a year, and it went really well. And then I got back into university now, and here, right before my first CDPR cast, and I had this massive assignment due, boom, panic attack. And I thought, oh no, I got rid of this pathway through, taking it easy for a year, and somehow the stress built and built and built, and it just got reinforced. And it's a really scary thing, because once that is reinforced, that's how people develop agoraphobia, because what happens is they go out in public and they experience a panic attack because it gets easily triggered by a stressor, like people, anything really, nothing it doesn't have to be an extreme thing, any stressor. Yes. And so they avoid that place because it's now a stressor. And they go to the grocery shop and they get a panic attack and they think, oh gosh, I can't go to the grocery shop anymore. Anyway, that's how later on they don't leave their house anymore. And you go from your house to your kitchen to your bedroom to, that's how a person cracks. And that's not good. So the idea is to immediately cut off that pathway, which is, if you have to take a chill pill to stop your brain from reinforcing that pathway, you do that. If you have to take an antidepressant to help the brain fix itself, because it's quite literally damaged sometimes. It's a lot of people are very much against antidepressants or all that, but sometimes your brain seriously has a lack of serotonin,
100%.
And it needs serotonin to help rebuild itself. It's sometimes very necessary for some people with hormonal imbalances in the brain, because your brain does get damaged, and you don't want that to happen because that just makes it all the worse, you know. So yeah, it certainly helped me with my psychology studies, and so being able to actually know what it is like. And the worst part is, you know, that it isn't normal, you know, it doesn't make sense, and you know, objectively you're fine, it's an assignment, but your brain has been so conditioned to experience the stressor that it immediately goes into fight or flight mode, and you suddenly, you know, it's like, well, you have to run or you have to die.
Yes.
And it's a problem. Yeah, no, it's a weird problem. I think 5% of the population have anxiety, I think, and a lesser part have frequent panic attacks, which is a lot, I found.
I'm not sure. I'm a big fan of like saying it's normal or not normal, because it feels like something anybody can develop. At the end of the day, we're just chemicals, neural pathways, and ta-da, you're a person. Congratulations, or whatever being it is. And so if you find yourself getting reinforced, you know, time and time again of a bad experience with stress or working too hard, and so it always feels like every little small thing is just adding this overwhelming lot of stress, and it's just always boiling over, always overflowing. It's a mess. You can learn those responses. People, just like Pavlov's dogs, right? Ding the bell.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's a natural thing in many ways. The goal is to avoid it, and it sounds like with help from therapy, being conscious of it, there are tools to combat it. But it is brutal. That if you start getting reinforced, things that are small start seeming really big. And to be honest, I'm not ever gonna be. Well, someday I might have that. I don't personally feel that now. But sometimes where I say, wow, I need to make a thumbnail for a video, it'll take 5 minutes tops. I get a little bit of, you know, cringe inside, a little bit of cramp. I'm like, ugh. Oh, it feels like something I don't want to ever do. Not that I don't want to do it. I do want to do it. I want to put out a video. It needs a good thumbnail. And there's that cringe inside. And then imagining that magnified, overwhelming and brutal. It doesn't surprise me. People accidentally along the way, as they push themselves. Hardworking, intelligent people suffer from this.
It's exactly, and that's a problem. It's that small your brain gets conditioned like that. It's like, okay, you get a little bit of stress every time you do a YouTube video. Okay, so that gets conditioned, and that gets reinforced in the brain. So that little reaction is just a little bit quicker every time. And then perhaps the stress gets a little bit more, and automatically your brain forms that structure, and it gets reinforced. And it essentially, if you don't cut that stress out, and you allow it to continually persist, it gets so reinforced that it could just, your body just decides, well, it can't, you know, deal with the stress, and I always thought, wow, panic attack sounds like someone, you know, hyperventilating. It sounds weak, but it's like it's horrible, because it's just the body. Like, I immediately, when I get it, it's I'm doing my thing, and I just suddenly feel this spike of adrenaline up my neck, and then suddenly my whole chest just starts to burn immensely. So it's not like it's like a physical pain, which it's not like I'm, you know, on the floor crying or panicking. It's like, it's just I'm doing my thing, and the body just immediately gets this fight or flight spike of adrenaline. And the problem is, there's nothing to fight. That's the thing. It's because we're conditioned to react to predators in the wild. You know, I can't fight my assignments. You know, I can't just quickly deal with it, so that it doesn't go. Exactly. So it doesn't go away, and it's for many people it's different. Some people actually get different sort of panic attacks, which is quite vivid, with seizure-like symptoms. And you know, it's not a thing you do with volition. It's totally out of your control, which is horrible, because again, it's because you push yourself so much. The body just says, nope. It's time to crack. I can't.
No, and there's a point where you can't work the employee forever. You can't work the body forever. You can't ignore your id forever. I also want to say, sometimes you need to counter chemicals or chemicals. If you have a trained psychiatrist you're working with, things like antidepressants can be a true godsend, right? It helps you have those moments where you aren't going to be forming negative connections of stress. Like, oh, hey, you know what? I have enough dopamine. I'm not forming this connection. Maybe I'm even reversing that connection. With that said, not a medical trained professional, no idea if that's how it works totally, but I have a positive view on antidepressants. Sometimes it's just chemicals at the end of the day, and
I
if
have
we
a
have,
very positive view. It saves lives,
yeah, it
and
100% does.
it's one of my favorite quotes as well. It's like people often ask like, what do you do with a suicidal patient if you're a therapist or psychiatrist? Therapists can't just give medication. You take them to the psychiatrist. But the thing is, if you have a very depressed patient who is suicidal, you medicate them. You medicate them immediately because you can't treat a dead patient. It's one of my favorite quotes. You can't treat a dead patient, and whether you're full medication or not, if someone is on the brink of ending it all and it's that bad, or you can take this to different forms as well with the panic attacks thing, where your brain has been so conditioned to get panic attacks that you can take away the stressors. You can put that person in a room for a week and say you have nothing to fear, and that the panic attacks have been so ingrained, they just get them anyway. That's where it's like, okay, things aren't going well right now. Therapy isn't fixing this anytime soon, and we need to put a stop to it right now. That's where you sometimes need to medicate someone. But of course, I'm not a trained professional when it comes to medication, so don't go ahead and just take pills. I'm not saying that, but sometimes you sort of really need to first get someone in a stable condition before you can get into therapy. And some people need years of therapy and they never truly recover. They always go on with therapy, but it helps. But sometimes medication is very much necessary, especially antidepressants. People don't realize how many lives antidepressants have saved.
And there was I was watching, I'm a sucker for Healthy Gamer, GG, I already mentioned it in this conversation. And he was describing how, I was revisiting a very dark video on the subject of suicide, where someone close to him had committed suicide, and he was explaining how, the medical community has done so much with the actual like physical body, where if you have a clogged artery, they can perform surgery to move up, I think it is an artery or veins from your leg to your heart to get it working again. They can cut this and that. They one time to save somebody's hand, they can reattach it to your leg, so it has blood flow until the hand, the hands are able to heal that up enough where they can reattach it to the arm that's damaged. Like, it is so many wild things you can do physically, but mental is brutal. The advances there are tough, and so that is. And it's getting worse. You look at the statistics around suicide, it is increasing, not decreasing in the modern world. We are struggling with this. While we're, curing diseases, mental is brutal. Physical, we can handle. We look at COVID-19 recently, right? We were able to expedite a vaccine where multiple companies found answers that work, right? Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, they were able to, with different collaborations, find answers that worked, all different from each other, a little bit here, there. But no one's found a good answer for like, oh yeah, here's your vaccine against anxiety. Here's your vaccine against suicidal thoughts, right? The mental aspects of health are so important. It's so undervalued by society, and it's also, I think, part of the reason we're getting worse. Also, social media is a thing. Not helping. But
No, it's not. I mean, there are various reasons I'd say, for people being more depressed. And I don't think it's us changing biologically. I think it's our environment just so quickly shifting in a way it's not always supposed to. Being more isolated, being more online, all that. COVID isn't helping, that's for sure. COVID's going to have scary long-term effects that we can't even envision yet. One of the things I had to study this year were children and the effect of COVID on them. The fact that they are having to go to school with masks on, I mean, that is some pivotal years of social development, and that's a very small area where you need to undergo some severe social development, and if you lack that, it's affecting you for the rest of your life. I mean, it's like parents who keep their child away from other children. It's the worst thing you can do for them. And I mean, these children are going to school with masks on. They can't see whether the other child is smiling. They're like, little things like that are having long-term effects that we can't yet envision. And children's schedules being disrupted as well, not going to school, being at home. It's like children are also going on severe anxiety, and then when you go up to the teenage spectrum, it's also more depression and all that. It's very scary. And Yeah, no, but yeah, if there are any parents in chat, apparently the best thing you can do is to provide them structure. Ironically, going back to the first part of our conversation, give them their routine. Try to
Yes.
replicate what they had in school. Don't just do things in the spur of the moment. Give them a routine. From 2 to 4, we will watch this program, and from 8 to 12, you will go to school, and from this to this, we will spend some time outside exercising, and just having that structure is so important.
Yeah, no, it'll be this time will be studied in our classes. So whether sociology, whether it's medically, COVID-19 has had a lasting impact on future. And we also notice areas in society where we're weaker than ever before. Looking at media and the rise of the anti-vaxxers as something that's plaguing the United States as another it hits every age group, whether it's formative years and you're young, whether you're older and now you're looking at misinformation. But yeah, there's just COVID-19 is wild and definitely
Yeah,
really
it's
bad on isolating
ridiculous.
people in particular. A lot of people, yeah, tough time.
Yeah, it's not good. And I know you're not supposed to look at chats, but there's a discussion regarding whether strong people are more prone to panic attacks. No, I think it's just more memorable when strong people have them. It's always more shocking to hear of a person you see on TV all the time actually suffering from debilitating anxiety. But no, I mean, if you're a weak person, you're probably more prone to actually have really debilitating anxiety and panic attacks. The lower you are in society's hierarchy structure that we've made, the less serotonin your brain gets. Believe it or not, this has also been proved by scientific studies. Like, we constantly detect our surroundings and where we are in them, and yeah, if you're a weak person, you're probably more prone to get anxiety, if anything. But I can't back this up with evidence, as I haven't researched it.
No
But
problem.
no, strong people are definitely not more prone to
Yeah,
anxiety. That
how
is
are you
definitely true.
defining weak or strong here? Are you defining it as place in society, physical strength?
Mm. It's difficult. I mean, how would I define it? That's a good question. I'd probably go with the normal sort of definition of just a weak or a strong person. I guess weak. With that's more a philosophical question, I'd say, because everyone has a picture in their mind when you say weak person and strong. Strong probably being more determined, more hard working, more able to face barriers in their way. Weak person more submissive to their environment, not able to stand up for themselves, more prone to sort of give up, more scared of the world. And no, I'm not trying to oust people here. Like, we are all human and we all have all of those aspects, just certain degrees of them. But yeah, if there are more stresses in your life, if you perceive more threats, if you're more afraid because there are, you don't have a stable income, you don't have a family to support you, your boss, you have a boss, you're not at the top, someone else is determining your livelihood, you're much more prone to stress, and you're much more prone to get overworked, and you're much more prone to get anxiety and panic attacks. The panic attacks don't just come out of the blue, they don't just happen to people who are sitting in their yard all day daydreaming. They're happening to people who are undergoing a lot of stress. So like, strong people in big positions might very well experience them, but those who experience them more and aren't able to handle the stress, they also will get them more. But yeah, getting a panic attack doesn't label you as a weak person at all. But yeah, I'm just trying to say, as it's not strong people who get them more. That's for sure.
Interesting. I always view it I have a very different view on it. Of course, not medically trained. Take it with a grain of salt. I always view it much more correlated with stress and like confidence in situation, right? So, for example, you described how you had some panic attacking, a topic we haven't hit, and I don't even know if I'll hit it this interview, which is Gwent casting, right? Oh, you have a huge assignment coming up. It's your first Gwent cast, panic attack. I don't think of you as a weak person, right? Your entire time in high school shows that you were willing to challenge cultural norms and authority to do what you feel is right. I'm hard pressed to say, oh yeah, well, Tia, she's a weak person. There's a really good chance that she was gonna have it. Inevitable. I always view it as I also view entrepreneurs. I know my mom once described it. She was a successful entrepreneur This is not like a multi-million-dollar enterprise, but she made a great income for a while on her business.
My cat is dying. Can I just
Okay,
let
go
her
for it,
out?
go for
I'm
it.
so sorry.
Go
She's
for it.
throwing a proper tantrum right now. She's not happy. Okay. Okay.
All good.
He was rolling around there, just going at it.
All good, all good. So picking up where I left
Yes,
off.
your mom.
Yes. So my mom was an entrepreneur, successful. Again, not a million, multi-million-dollar thing, but made a great income for a while until she decided to move on from that her little entrepreneurial endeavor. But she described, she'd wake up in the night of like, oh my god, do I need to do more work? I'm really nervous about this. Is this checked? So I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs suffer from things that are panic attack related, overwhelming. I always view it all much more in terms of stress. How much can you take, and based on yourself in the situation. I agree with you though. Somebody says less resources. Maybe they don't have a stable income. Maybe they're unsure of where they're gonna sleep tomorrow. They might be suffering or bottling it up and having consequences later when they try to check in with themselves, mentally and physically. I think I agree. Somebody with more resources might have a better time, but based on the amount of stress they're willing to take on, they're gonna suffer. I don't know if I'd classify it as weak or strong. But I do think I would agree of the amount of resources. I would speculate resources and the amount of stress and responsibility take on are bigger. Or that's where I would look in determining things like panic attacks, anxiety, and stuff like that, and also biological as well.
I totally agree with you.
Excellent.
All of that adds on. It's a whole spectrum of stressors that
Yep.
just accumulates.
No, and that makes sense. It makes sense. At least that's my thoughts. I don't know. And then not a medically trained professional, just rolling with
That's
it.
right. No, I mean it's common sense, right? It's just anybody who has gone through it will know, what led up to it, right? So they, because again, it's not a choice. Like if anything, people just deal with the anxiety for too much because stress and anxiety, they're just normal parts of life. And instead of running away from the task at hand, they just sort of deal with it and push through because A, they might not have a choice. It's their job and their income and their livelihood. Or B, they just, are strong-willed people or who will have you or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's ignoring that anxiety and taking it for granted. And it just gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And the brain is too easy. It just accesses that part of your brain far too easily, and it evolves into a full-blown panic attack when you least expect it. And a lot of people at first, an interesting statistic, I don't know the numbers, but I think that most people, well, at least this is what someone else has said in the academia, so whether he's wrong or not, I don't know, but most people who have their first panic attack normally first learn about it in the casualty ward in a hospital, because when people have their first panic attack, they generally think they are dying. I did too.
Wow.
I actually did go to the hospital. I thought I was dying. It's like people didn't realize it's not just a state of mind. It's a severe bodily reaction. Some people, they have parts of their limbs going numb, which would suggest you're having a heart attack or a stroke. With me, my heart was beating far too rapidly, and my whole body just burns. It's so severe, and of course I didn't know what this was, because again, it's like I'm a hardworking student, I'm studying, I'm having a anxiety, but that's normal. I'm working really hard, and it just snapped. And it's like, yeah, I drove home and went to the hospital. I genuinely thought it was the end. I was dying. I tried to stick it through in my dorm for about a week, where I was at some point just sort of actually lying on the floor thinking, whoa, I am actually dying. Because I was thinking, no, this is fine, you're fine. I don't know what this is, but it's not a heart attack, right? Your heart isn't sore, it's just you've got burning all over your chest. But then I realized, oh, I have no appetite either, and I can't drink water, which was also problematic because you're thinking all of these medical things. And a week later, I thought, well, I once read that you die if you don't eat for a week. And the fact that I haven't is rather scary. So that's when I went home. My mom's a doctor. Told her she had an idea it was a pan. But I forced her to take me to the hospital because it was like, this isn't good. And also shows how it can just last a week. That's scary. It's very scary. It's like it can last a full-blown week.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you get it severely enough. So interestingly enough, most people do think they're dying and go to the hospital at first.
Yeah, and I don't blame them, right? And it's also a it's a mental stress and what you're putting on yourself, and it's a physical reaction. Also mental too, right? It gets overwhelming. But you're feeling chest pain, and you're like, well, that maybe I'm having a heart attack, or maybe I should also just endure it, like you did for a week. It shows that disconnect of, oh wait, I have a situation problem, stress from mental, maybe physical as well, but I'm having a strong physical reaction. Well, I remember, so my favorite business book had a situation like this as well. My favorite business book of all time is Maverick by Ricardo Sumler. He's someone from Brazil, made a really interesting company here called Semco. And he was touring, I forget if he was touring like a medical facility or a factory, and I think it was in Boston. He fainted, just straight up hit the floor. Goes to the hospital. Like, all right, doc, what happened? I just completely collapsed. I just was feeling fine. Felt a little off for a second, then down. And so they go through all the checks. And at the end, the doctor, so he's like, all right, he's praying for the worst. Doctor comes over, says, so, here's some aspirin. You're overworking yourself. You're going to be dead in 10 years, or you're going to change your life. Pick your poison. And off you go. And that was it. The guy just literally, a really intelligent CEO, was working himself to death and was going to be out of it by, I think, 40 or 50 if he didn't change his life and find better ways and have a new relationship with stress and work. And it was fascinating. And it's tough. It happens to anyone.
Scary. Yeah, you're right. Like everything you said, like the scary part about all of this is, well, again, this needs a short-term solution. This isn't something you want your entire life. And if medication is what you need 100%. To constantly have your brain literally unlearn, because if you don't use, it's also when you're studying, if you don't keep studying, your brain will sort of, that little connections it makes between synapses and all that's reinforced, it will slowly stop using them and you will unlearn a lot of things. And it's really how our brains work. So if you have to take chill pills for the next 2 years for your brain never to get a panic attack during that 2 years and not enforce that, if that's what's necessary, and your psychiatrist describes that, you do it. But it's been proven, like, people with severe anxiety and stress live significantly shorter lives. It just compromises everything. Your immune system, it kills you slowly but surely. You die a lot quicker than you should. If you have constant anxiety and stress, you die quicker. It's horrible, but it's very true. So it's not something you should sort of try and live with. It's something you need to treat. And if it takes medication to start that process, or if you need it for the rest of your life, again, I'm not a doctor. Your psychiatrist will be able to tell you exactly what you need, what you can by accident get dependent on. Dependent. What's the correct English term for addicted? Because a lot of the times, because luckily what I was initially prescribed, you get certain types, but some people are so gone. They need the strongest type there is, and those types are very addictive, but they have to take it. But the thing is, if they take them for too long, they will get addicted to them, meaning their body will start exhibiting stress and panic attacks when they're off it because it needs it. And that's actually what Jordan Peterson went through, which is tragic, because people who don't like him now just call him a drug addict to quickly throw all of his great thoughts under the bus. But meanwhile, he was prescribed that medication by a doctor, and it's medication people take who undergo severe anxiety, and it's clear that this poor man had it as well, and he took it for too long. And it's anybody who is anybody in the medical field, at least my mom would say, well, or at least most people would say, you can't prescribe that medication for too long. And it's very dangerous to do so. And he couldn't go off it. He had complete withdrawal from a simple medication that's supposed to help him with his severe anxiety. And, it was brutal for him. And now people label the guy as a drug addict. But if anything, it's normalized it a bit more for people who are dealing with that same thing, because sometimes you just can't go off it. It's not that easy for some people, and
not
it's
at all
tragic, but it's to the body. It's not the mind. It's not like they're choosing to do this. It's very unwilling. And interestingly enough, one of the
Mhm.
other assignments I now did is something I didn't know existed, which is non-epileptic seizures,
Okay.
which is essentially a seizure. Epilepsy is something that's you can
Mhm.
see it in the brain. It's a real problem. You have to take medication for it, but there are countless people who get seizures and they go for their epilepsy scans and it shows they don't have it, and doctors think they're faking it, which is a huge problem. But they aren't in control of the seizures, they're not faking them, and it's often found that therapy actually can decrease and get totally rid of it. And most of these people are found to have childhood traumas, and it's mostly females as well for some reason. But where these people have epilepsy, well, just as anybody would, epilepsy, quote unquote, they have seizures. And it's, I would go as far to say, as the worst type of panic attack you can have, essentially, where they literally fall to the ground, get injuries, normally blackouts, come to. But the problem is it can't be picked up in the brain. It's not a biological thing you can detect. It's very much a mental thing that they can't control, and they need to be treated. But the thing is, it's not in the medical field to treat it because it's a psychological thing. So I'm just grateful it never got to that point. But you'll find people talking about panic attacks, describing that they sort of almost pass out, which again is just the body's. It's just the body freaking out. It's just so interesting how we're wired, really. I now go for jogs. I try to do it almost daily because I found that the body has too much pent up energy, and it's much more readily available to trigger that fight or flight response. So if you start your morning off with a jog, not only is exercise extremely good for serotonin and all that and happy hormones in the brain, and makes you healthy and all that, but it will take away all the excess energy for me, and it will make me a lot more calm during the day, which is normally good.
Nice. And you found the strategy that works for you. That's key. And also that physical aspect of exercise is good. It's something I struggle with. I keep going on and off. And I feel like it's something I gotta master. I think a lot of us struggle with it in the world. I'm glad you were able to find that exercise that works for you, gets your mind to a healthier and better place. And side effect also makes you physically stronger. It's a win-win. So I did want to ask, did you also, I want to mention the opioid crisis in the United States is a good example of what happens if you prescribe a medication too long. And this might have been opioids, might have been what you're mentioning. It's like just slightly modified meth. Like quite literally, if you look up it chemically, they just took meth and tweaked it. And it is ravaged communities and destroyed lives across the United States. Shout out to the Sackler family, who's responsible for this. Shout out there. To the best of my knowledge, it's it's their company that pushed it, advertised it, encouraged doctors to prescribe it, and it's devastating to this day. It's so addictive because it's meth. You're giving someone meth. Be very careful with it. I did want to ask you, do you have anything mentally that you're really trying to struggle through these days, right? You mentioned the panic attacks and having some strategies like jogging to help bring those in. Do you have anything that you're trying to tackle these days in addition to that? Or is that like the focus?
The panic attacks.
Yeah, well, like I feel like everyone has like a mental struggle in their lives at any time, right? That is, they're each unique person to person. Maybe you're afraid of going outside. Maybe you're overwhelmed with stress. Maybe you're struggling with the idea of living up to your parents' expectations. But whatever you're struggling with, do you have anything that you're struggling with right now that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, well, I think my biggest that's the thing that's the reason I got overworked in the first place. Like I'm very much of the belief, I'm the type of believe there could be more to life than meets the eye. And in any way you'd like to perceive that, but I feel like I have a I feel like my goal here is to constantly be productive and sort of help other people. And because of that feeling of responsibility of thinking I am in a position to be able to help people, I feel guilty if I'm not productive. So that's why every hobby of mine I've turned into something productive. I love reading, I love writing, I'm writing a book. I love playing games, I'm streaming. You know, I love discovering things about the human mind. I'm getting a degree in psychology. Now, that is the reason for all the stress because of course all of those have measurable, success to it. You can quantify your success on Twitch. You can measure the amounts of income you're making, etc., etc. Now, that takes away the things Thea does that has nothing productive in
Yep.
it at all. Like, even
Same.
jogging, that's
Yep.
productive. That's exercise. Like, I struggle to find a way to just not do anything. Like, even when I'm reading now, I'm thinking, how can this possibly help me? Is this helping me get ideas for my book? Is this helping me learn more so I can actually use that information to help the world, or give a contribution to my field in psychology? So that's definitely not being able to shut down is one of the main reasons I was overworked to begin with. So I am constantly having to juggle all of these things I have dedicated a lot of time to. None of them can be dropped. I can't stop casting in Gwent. It's just too great. It's too great a thing. I love it, and you don't look a gifted horse in the face, I believe is
Gift
the
horse
expression.
in the mouth.
In the mouth, yeah.
Mouth face. That's close enough. It's ballpark.
Yeah, and I can't not publish the book after working on it for 7 years. I can't not go on with my studies because honors degree in psychology doesn't exactly get you anywhere. So dealing with that is what I'm dealing with. And again, mentally I'm fine with it. It's very objectively manageable if you just attribute your time to it. It's the body that's panicking, so it's me trying new ways every day to sort of deal with that, because again, it wasn't a problem for quite some time. I dealt with it quite nicely, but then suddenly all of them accumulated at once, which wasn't the plan. I didn't initially get into university this year, and then I got the casting position at CDPR, and then suddenly I have a casting gig, and boom, I get into psychology, whereas I should have gotten in December, but they only let me know in April, a week after classes started. So I'm already behind with my classes, which determines whether I get in abroad, which determines my future. I can't not cast because that's my source of income. I can't not finish the book because then that's 7 years wasted. So it's constantly trying to juggle the stressors and trying to juggle mental health along with it, I'd say.
Yes, that makes sense. Also, that aspect of I want to be productive, especially in Jordan Peterson's work in particular. Productivity seeps throughout his self-help advice, and I know you like Jordan Peterson quite a bit, and that is
I do.
That's the tough part. I still have yet to read the book. I'm sorry about that. I will get to it.
I still have to finish it. I'm gonna be honest here. I don't,
beautiful. I'm in the
don't
clear.
always have
Stop
time.
feeling bad.
You're fine.
So I think that is the tough part of when do I, sit down, watch my show about a food truck, and that is a difficult choice, especially if you're really motivated, saying, you know what, I have privilege. I was able to work hard and get myself to a good place. Probably it's a mix of both for most people. How do I use it to better serve? Like, that's a noble purpose. But then if you start getting too obsessed with it, you start feeling guilty when you're not being productive. And that is stressful. And then your body doesn't get what it needs, that relaxation. And then things start to spiral. And then, oh no, you're overwhelming with stress. And the perfect storm hit. You had too much stress built up with all of a sudden additional pressures. And boom, you crack. And natural.
Exactly.
The tough thing to balance.
Exactly. Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible when you realize that it's you always have to tell yourself mind over matter, right? But it sucks when that's not the case, because if that was the case, I'd be going on about my daily duties like I normally would. But that's where you need to. That's exactly when that comes in, where it's like, okay, whatever whatever consciousness is, and wherever it resides, whether it's in the brain or outside, whatever your belief system is. Point is, you have a body in which you inhabit, and you need to look after it, because when your body cracks, it's clear that you've been neglecting it. So you can't constantly overwork yourself. Like, again, it's when I realized, well, Tia, it doesn't help that you're not exercising. It doesn't help that you're not always eating healthy, because it's quicker to eat a quick snack and get back to work. Not getting enough sleep, not healthy. So it sort of forces you, and I'd rather have this happen early in life. I guess 23 is early enough.
Yeah, it's good enough.
Than later in life. Because developing coping mechanisms is good, because you don't want to treat the anxiety. You want to prevent the anxiety. It shouldn't be there in the first place. Stress is something we all have. Anxiety, prolonged, is very unhealthy, and it's not normal. It's unfortunately it's normal. A lot of people deal with it, but it's not supposed to be normal.
It's a new environment.
Yeah.
Age.
Exactly. So you kind of need to sort of find ways in which you can deal with that. Ironically, meditation apparently is one of those ways. So I should probably also start tackling that at some point. But right now, leaving the house and going for a jog is just, that's one of the ways I'm starting it. Not that COVID helps at all.
Yep.
But being able to exercise is one of the best ways to just, it's like a natural antidepressant. Though a lot of people will use that and say, well, guys, you shouldn't have to take antidepressants, just go outside and go for a walk. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But it has a very similar effect. Obviously not in the dosage that an antidepressant
you gotta
would,
find what works for you and your specific situation and the amount of stress you have. Medication, whether it's go for a walk, whether it's reduce stress, take a break from things, say, I'm gonna only work on the book on vacation while studies take priority when I'm at school. Like whatever combination that works for you. You gotta match it to your situation. That's where you should take pride in as well. Trying to figure that out and execute upon it. How did so how did you balance? So you didn't get the university, and then you did get the university a week into the semester. You got a casting job with CDPR. How did you balance that with your schoolwork, with all of this going on, all this anxiety and stress kind of accumulating together? More so stress at this time, because they knew you could handle everything. How did you bounce it all?
Yeah, well, I kept telling myself, look, Tia, there are people out there in this world who have to make actual ends meet. They're not merely casting because it's a great opportunity. They study whilst having a job because they have to make ends meet, or else they don't have food on the table. So it is sort of the norm to sometimes work through university. So that helped me think, okay, well, you're not overworking yourself necessarily, but you know what? You don't take into account that casting in front of 26,000 people, although, I would make it seem through smiles that it's not stressful. Apparently, the body disagrees with the mind. It picks up the fact that 26,000 people are watching, and that is definitely very stressful. But again, I love it and I enjoy it. But it's not like the more attention, the better. It's like, woof. The more eyes, the more people seeing if you mess up, right? So it's sort of more than the normal job, because it's it's like a fear of public speaking. You know why those exist. It's so yeah, it's more stress than I'd like, because with a job, you work your set hours, you get out. You waiter, you get out, you go home, you're done. Whereas with Gwent, it's a constant intellectual sort of back and forth. It's a struggle. It's you have to be on top of your game. You have to know exactly what the pro players are doing at all times. You have to make sure that you're what the new cards do. You have to know the names. You have to be able to talk about them, and clear dead space or dead air. Can't recall the term,
it's
but
all good.
you have to be entertaining while you're doing it, which is also new to me, because I wouldn't call myself an entertainer. Flake, he's an entertainer. But so there's a lot of aspects to that, which is sort of at the back of your mind constantly. So you're thinking, okay, I did my share of Gwent today. I should work on my assignment. But what if I could do more and prevent a little bit of a screw up during a big open event, right? So juggling the two is easy enough, ironically. It's all that mental things that you have to work through, and we'll get there. It's not nearly as bad as I make it seem. I'm merely talking as if you're my therapist here and telling you exactly what's going through my mind when I'm thinking of these things. But otherwise, you work your set hours of university every day, and then every second day you have a 3-hour slot in which you play Gwent. I mean, reasonably, that's fine. And then when you get to the open event, you have a set week in which you need at least 3 to 5 hours every day, in which you need to prep with the pros, and you need to have rehearsals and all that, which takes up a bit more time, because taking a week off in university isn't exactly an option in this course. You know, you have set assignments due for that week. You can't just not do them. So I had my assignment the Monday after the class, which was loads of fun to try and juggle, especially if you like to procrastinate, which happens to be me. But otherwise, it's manageable. It's actually manageable.
That I'm glad you found it manageable. It definitely sounds stressful, particularly because it's not, as you mentioned, not as easy as just turning on a webcam and being like, here, I'm going to cast the games. Tons of prep, both long-term and short-term. You mentioned it every other day. So you're playing 3 hours every other day. So that adds up fast. It's 21 in 2 weeks, if my math's right. And
yeah.
And then when it comes time for the event, 3 to 5 hours on top of the schoolwork and assignments, the pressure, the exams, all of that. And then you have to execute. And if you mess up, you're in front of 20,000 plus people. And they're all going to be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. That's not how this card works. Or, this line of play is obvious. How did she miss it? That's a lot of pressure. And I give you a lot of credit for balancing it. That's not easy. That is not easy. And then,
thank you. I'm hoping it sort of just gets easier down the line, of course. I'm sure it does. It's, you know, it's you take it one bite at a time. You know, it's like, okay, you have your own community, and then you start doing qualifiers, which is suddenly 800 people watching. You know, that was also stressful, and then suddenly it wasn't. And then you go from an open to a masters where you have 9,000 to 26 all of a sudden. And, you know, you pretend like it doesn't matter. But then again, you realize you're stressing and say, it does matter. But I mean, it's, you work through it. I'm sure you really do reach a stage where it doesn't really ruffle your feathers at all anymore.
I think so. I mean, I think it's please.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
No. Go on.
I was gonna think it's the nature of mastery, right? I know. I was talking to somebody in my community who put out their first video on Gwent. They played a Gwent deck, they streamed it, and they put it together. And I remember them describing, oh my gosh, it took me forever. I had to figure out this step, this step, this step, and this step. I bet it took him hours. But now that he knows the steps, the next time he does it, he doesn't have to think about what's step one. He knows step one. He goes does step one, too. As it becomes more and more formulaic, ideally it gets easier and easier. Though for your case in particular, time constraints matter. University forces you to take an extra class. That means every week's going to be more stressful, or something cuts into the 3 hours of Gwent every other day. That can increase stress, but your relative mastery of academia and how the systems you need to succeed there, and mastery of casting, what you need to succeed there, could make it easier over time, I imagine. Unless you're someone like Flake, who we've had watch Flake on the channel, great guy. His ambition is to be a caster, meaning his stress must never really slow down because he has to be extra nitpicky. Because eventually you want to you want to be casting all the events. You need to be better than everybody. It can't just be a hobby. It's his dream career. Where I think it's a bit of a balance where, okay, you know, you just need to be, I mean, you've casted all the big events in Gwent. So not trying to put it down in sense of, at the end of the day, your career is not going to be defined by your casting. It makes sense that eventually you'll feel relaxed with it, while Watch Flake will eventually hit mastery and then have to level up again because now, you need to cast a bigger game. You need to go cast something with 20,000 people. As you mentioned, that pressure's there. It's interesting. But I would like to say, ultimately, as you practice more, I'm sorry to say this, as you practice more, stress should go down, though it can still go back up if you have more people watching you and there's more pressure. That's all I'm trying to say.
For sure. No, I completely agree with you. Again, to each his own. Everyone has different factors in play. And yeah, I mean, for me, Flake has by far already reached that mastery, like you said. But yeah, I mean, he does constantly have to learn new games because he's casting other games now too, which I can just imagine is even more stressful. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, he seems to have reached mastery. You can never know what goes on inside someone's head, whether they still really stress. I'm sure we all still have our down days, but at least he makes it seem effortless, which in my books is mastery of the arts.
Yes, I think you hit on a good point of managing multiple games. You have to have that 3 hours. You have to be he strives for that top level and everything. But for you though, obviously, instead of multiple games, you cast Gwent. We still have to put in all the time for Gwent and academia and your book and all these other different things. Just pretty crazy. I did have a question for you about one idea you did that did not go anywhere from what I could tell. Could you tell me about the student YouTube channel?
Yeah, actually still a thing I want to do, but definitely not now. Um, I do slowly want to go into more academic videos.
Okay.
Also, I will one day publish a book and need a channel that isn't game related. So,
Mm-hmm.
the student is just currently the placeholder name. I would, at the end, would likely be just my real name and surname. But no, I have so many interesting things that I can't always discuss on stream that I think would be better to have on a channel of its own. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
interesting things. You start off with the bystander effect and you know
Yes.
how it transpired first back in the day with Kitty Genovese getting murdered in front of all her apartment friends and they didn't interact with her or intervene. You know, and you go from there to the Stanford prison experiment and you'll have all that and you know each one would be its own video
Interesting
and
one.
like
Mm-hmm.
it would be really nice for me also to just get that knowledge into my head because it's been so long before you know where I studied
Mm-hmm.
it and then you know slowly but surely make a channel where you can just discuss anything, maybe even have people on. I don't know, right now there isn't a gap for that. We have you, it's all good.
Maybe.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
one day maybe have a like sort of maybe discuss other things, you know.
yeah. Well, I think.
But yeah, maybe.
Well, for your channel, you talk already about other real world topics instead of just Gwent, right? If I went to like a Spiro, it's gonna be on Gwent. For you, you do talk about stuff. Even just before this popped over to my channel. You were talking about non-Gwent stuff. I assume, judging by the mention of everyone saying, "Oh, we were having a deep conversation." I've never heard anyone have a deep conversation about, you know, this 4 provision card might need to be a 5 provision card. It's not usually
Yeah,
deep.
no.
I think people know you in your community as someone who's willing to have those hard conversations. And in my personal belief, there is a demand for it, or at least I'm banking on there being a demand for it in the streaming world. YouTube, pretty saturated, but still needs good videos on hard topics like the Stanford prison experiment. But hey, honestly, join the party of have hard conversations live on stream and the world judging you. It's gonna be great. The world needs more of it.
Hey, the world needs to become normalized to it because if they you know if we need more people to talk about crazy things so that
Mm-hmm.
one day people can talk about a little bit less than normal things and don't get judged, you know. We need to set
Yes.
that boundary out there. Not that it's that crazy in my point of view,
No.
but anything not normally discussed is interesting. A lot of streamers have you know sort of rules in their streams which I don't judge at all, like to
Mm-hmm.
each his own, but you know you can't discuss politics, you can't discuss controversial things, you know, no hard discussions. I get that. It's you know if you're only there for like a certain environment then that's also fine, but for me I think the more you can have those in a civilized atmosphere, also
Yes.
one of these where it's direct, you know, you can directly talk to people, whereas YouTube is more of an after the fact, let's discuss what we just saw in the video sort of thing. You know, I love that because the more we
Mm-hmm.
normalize, you know, intellectual discussion regarding any topic, the
Mm-hmm.
better society must become, in my opinion, honestly.
I agree. It's also emotional, right? I remember Buza, also known as Berza, came on the show and he talked for an hour about divorce. And
Wow. I need to
that,
watch that one.
yeah, you totally should. It was a great one. I'm really biased. I really like them all. But it was really deep. Or Fuchsia Briefs finding out his child and likely both of his children have autism. Those conversations are hard to have, but having them might help somebody else who's going through similar experiences. Tucking it all away behind not culturally it's not, it's, you should be, tucking away your hidden problems or worries or fears. It's not culturally normative. Like, whatever barrier is preventing the conversation bothers me because these are real problems that people are having and it needs to be a platform for them. Anyways, I'm super biased because that's what I'm gambling on, baby. But I like having these conversations.
It's a good investment in my opinion. You're right. The thing is, I always say there's more to life than Gwent. Gwent just
Mm-hmm.
being the game I'm playing, you know, it's nothing against Gwent. It's like people, I see more than a name now in chat, you know, seeing that I've interacted with so many of them in, well, not in real life,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, but over calls and such. It's like these are real people with real lives, and they might be watching Gwent now as a little bit escape, which you're absolutely entitled to, and I'm really glad if I can ever provide that little escape for a part of a day.
Yep.
It's mine as well. But there's some real things, and some people, it's a defense mechanism. They'll never really actively seek these things out on YouTube or so. It doesn't get recommended to them based on the search history. They don't necessarily talk about mental health, and to them it's a very foreign topic. And mental health being one of the things, but even spirituality, for example, just having a logical conversation about these things instead of just hearing the absolute worst of the worst, being absolutely horrible and giving everyone a bad name. Just, making it more normalized to talk about it at all. I mean, again, you can't go wrong, especially in a safe space like this where anything can be deleted. Nothing lasts on Twitch. It's unless you're a really big name and someone clips you. It's not like this is archived unless, of course, you post it to YouTube, which is totally in your control, which is at least nice. Otherwise, you just copyright strike someone if you really need to.
Smacking them down. But get me off that.
Anyway, it's needed.
No, I think it's definitely needed. So you mentioned about how. Well, let me go down this path. I don't know if we were mentioned yet, but on the internet, these kind of conversations can be hard to have. You'd mentioned how streamers sometimes put hard rules to avoid it, but I've also seen the other where if there's no rules, people will have terrible conversations. And I actually had this happen on my channel. I was curious. It was in the middle of the hot tub meta on Twitch, right, where lots of women and a couple of particularly notable ones would come in very scandally clad bikinis. And they had a lot of views. Very popular. I don't exactly think sexual content being popular is a new thing on the internet, but it was a pretty new thing for Twitch, having it being such a large presence. I want to have a talk about it. And because it's an interesting topic of terms of where do you draw the line? Because we don't want to become something like a porn site. But likewise, you don't want everybody clad in long sleeve shirts, jeans, a full dress code for every stream. They have to draw a line somewhere. It's balanced. It's murky, and some people think it's immoral. Some people say it's moral. It's an interesting topic. But I remember I went to have this conversation. A little nervous, a little hot right now, and then somebody cracked a sexist joke in my chat, and it derailed the whole conversation, and that was really frustrating to me. I was deprived of a conversation, which I was a little nervous about going into, and then to have it immediately thrown off balance and just derail the whole chat was miserable. For your conversations, you also have hard conversations, and many of them harder than should there be bikini clad women on Twitch, and if so, where do you draw the line? How do you manage that in your chat? What rules do you set to facilitate a good conversation without derailing the whole thing?
Well, the thing is, a lot of the times my conversations become more a chat talking to each other and me whilst I'm having more of a sort of rant. Not a rant is totally the wrong word. A sort of monologue, if you will, because chat just moves so fast. I can't talk whilst reading all of it. But it's sort of just my cat is screaming at my door now.
To get your cat.
Okay, she's screaming like an infant, and my motherly instincts are kicking in. So
okay.
She knows how to abuse that. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no big deal. Cats are cats after all.
Okay, there you go. So it's I'm really proud of my community I've sort of gathered over the years, and I sort of feel like there's a pact mentality of what is expected, and if someone goes astray, the whole chat will sort of respond to it in kind, and that's what I'm hopeful for. Mods don't necessarily need to be there. That the chat will say, well, dude, you're going a bit offline here, don't be racist, don't be that and that, and which I kind of like. But if necessary, I'll just give a quick, I'll quickly tell them, like, it's, hey, let's just keep this civil, don't go into that direction, and if they continue, I will, depending on what they say, like if it's really that bad, because our controversial discussions can be quite controversial. If I find it too bad, I have banned people in the past, not people I know, random people coming into chat and just being really rude, getting personal with people for no reason in a discussion. Like, let's say we're talking about religion. Some people say, well, some will say, yeah, well, there is a God. There just is da 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 da. And someone else will say, well, no, da 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 da. And then you'll have this one person just sort of starting to really insult one group, like just going at us, making it unnecessarily cruel. Whereas there was a healthy discussion here. People were giving their opinions, which is nice. And it's just making it totally unnecessarily cruel. And then that got him a ban eventually. You tell them to stop, and if it's a really, really, really bad comment, obviously you ban, but ban is always the last resort.
Yes.
I'm not the type to go into the ban trigger. But
Really.
Interesting discussion about the bikini thing. I just now that you piqued my interest, some other girl had a really nice way of stating it, in which I totally agree. There's a place for these things, and it's not Twitch. Porn is not made to be on Twitch, and the problem with that is there are some of us who don't do it, and like me, myself, and the problem is the site quickly gets associated with that. And she would walk around in public with a Twitch sweatshirt, and people would immediately assume, and they'd come up and ask her, oh, she's doing that. That's cool. And she'd be like, no, I'm just a gamer. And the problem is you're throwing all of these females who aren't willingly doing that online under the bus by association, whereas there are so many sites for these sort of things. It's taking advantage of a gaming website where there are no competition and trying to be the first to do it. And Twitch wasn't helpful at all. I mean, Twitch just encouraged it. So there's nothing against doing it, but it's like time and place is so important. This is supposed to be a gaming website. It's just, it's not supposed to be. I won't go into details, but
I mean,
it wasn't bikinis at all. At some point, one of the females were just wearing lingerie, which is like, again, that's fine. Like, I won't judge that at all on any other platform, because if there's a need and a demand, so what, whether I do it or not, doesn't matter. But on Twitch, it gives all of the females the same association, and we don't want that. And it's sort of not justified because we're not getting anything out of it. We're not being paid for that. So we shouldn't be getting the negative attributes of it along with it.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of truth to what you're saying in terms of Twitch getting a different association with it. It also hurts every streamer indirectly through advertising, because basically advertisers pay to appear on websites. The more premium ones that are, kid friendly, you get more money per ad. And likewise, if you were to advertise on Pornhub, it's a lot cheaper to do that because not many companies want to do it. It's simply supply and demand. Disney wants a high bar, but if you're meeting that high bar, there's more demand now for those advertising spots. It hurts everyone, and it does. It hurts women, right? If in the sense of, if you are the most popular streamer, or at least all the top streamers for females are in bikinis, that's a bit of a setback. Like, there's a real difference between somebody who's hypersexualizing themselves and like a Pokemon who is making sure she's beautiful, but she is there to very down to earth. She's going to game. She's a creator, and there's a lot of respect, I think, that comes from that. So there's a real identity thing, and ultimately, I don't blame the women who are making a lot of money off of this. I do blame Twitch though. Twitch is just giving little mild bans, and then at least back then was giving mild bans, and basically everyone was just playing a game of how far can you take the line without a permaban? And the answer was there should have been some
ridiculous.
Should have been some bans early on.
Twitch. Yeah, of course. It should have been snuffed out. Twitch, like, to the money they were getting through subs. Ultimately, it's sort of, you hate the player, hate the game, not the player.
Yeah.
Again, not at all judging here on morality and all that, but it's like, now, you that sort of culture, there's a clear line between, gaming and pornography. It's as simple as that. And that was pornography, as simple as that. So you sort of have your platform for that, and yeah, there's some competition on it, but that's your fair game. Now, doing it here because there's no competition, again, you have females now suddenly with people coming into their chats on other streams, expecting the female to do more weird things or dress more provocatively because that's sort of the norm. And well, they're actively trolls mostly, but still, it's like it trickles down, and it's not like, like we're the innocent little girls getting hurt by this. It's more like, no, gaming platform, males aren't as affected, except for in terms of advertisements, like you said, but it's like the image of, like, we've fought so long for not being objectified. So I mean, again, like, you can totally do pornography in that, but I mean, if we come onto a site where we want to be respected for playing a game, I know this sounds silly, or being a caster or anything of that. Now,
anything that's not their body, right?
Exactly. Now you have ironically, a lot of them said that Twitch chat is objectifying them, but that's simply not the case. If your only content is your body, it makes it as if we are only here because we are females and we have bodies. It's sort of sets us back in the Twitch community, because we have to go further now to prove again that there are girls who actually play games, and they're not just here to advertise their bodies and link you back to their OnlyFans site.
Exactly. No, I agree with everything you said there. And we're in an age where there are massive female streamers who did not do sexual content. Pokimane, Valkyrie both come to mind. A lot of people in the offline TV group, they all found very successful careers. Just Lily Pichu comes to mind, by being gamers, by being content creators, by being themselves and not just a body. And there is if sexual content continues to persist on Twitch, it kind of takes down the whole platform. I do wonder if it'll force female creators to be more tempted to migrate to YouTube, where the landscape's much more vast. And sure, there's sexual content on YouTube, but YouTube is just so vast compared to Twitch. It's a whole nother beast that it just doesn't matter because there's no association there. The streaming platform's all new there, and everything's on YouTube. Unlike Twitch, which is much more right now gaming. And if we want to expand it, I would rather them expand it into IRL content, non-sexual. Have people talk about animals come on the show. Have lawyers chat on their own streams. You've seen some rise in business from people like Devin Nash, who stopped because of a lot of this in the gambling stuff, streaming. He was business oriented. Ethan Evans, former VP of Amazon, he's streaming on Twitch. He actually used to run Twitch. And I'd love to lean more into that, less into sexual, but the only way to really get around that is for Twitch to stop creating categories and start ban-hammering it, especially when they were going sexual content. It's getting worked up. Ooh, getting all worked up. Sexual content is moving to ASMR, because there are people who do ASMR seriously, but it was not being taken seriously.
The same streamer. I won't even mention names, but the female streamer who sort of started jumping from category to category, and now she went to ASMR, which ironically I have listened to so much ASMR. It was just the most magical experience. I'm talking about girls ringing little bells and making noises with their nails, like nothing sexual. But it's just like this. It was a really cool, relaxing sort of almost meditation of just hearing like little bells ring. And now comes this girl who's clearly promoting her porn on the side, and she has a porn site, but I mean, it's like, but that's not enough for some reason. So now she's like coming here with her mic and like putting it to her face and like just licking it sexually as much as she can, and like lewd clothing, which again just takes over the whole ASMR platform, gives all the ASMR streamers right there, all the girls who are actually like some of the most wholesome girls I knew, because I initially didn't know what ASMR was, and they're really like this nice girls sitting there, like mostly hippie types, like doing their thing, and they're just having a good time. And now you have one big crowd who witnessed that and forever associate ASMR with porn, and they don't know the difference. And it's like taking all of these girls down with you who didn't agree to this. Like, they didn't go to a site where this is a thing. They went to Twitch. So I agree. The problem is porn. Like the internet was created for pornography.
Mm-hmm.
It will eventually, if this became a porn site, if Twitch allowed people to do that in the swimming
Uh-huh.
pool section, you'd have all of these people flock to it, and it will become the most viewed section sooner than later. And
Yes.
eventually it will drown out all the competition, and that's what would happen. Essentially, gaming would not be a thing on Twitch.
No.
Twitch would become the next porn site. I know this is a very slippery slope argument I'm using, but you saw what happened where
Well.
it took over Twitch for like a month, with one streamer,
Yeah.
and then a second, and then a third. Now, if you had enough of them doing that, this would just be a more easily accessible porn site. Like gaming would come second every single time. People would watch porn if it was for the disgust factor, the sexual factor, the interest factor. Not to mention that there are children on Twitch, by the way, who are
Yes.
watching Minecraft, and Minecraft being one of the biggest categories there are, who will go into these streams unchecked. It's just not the right site for it. But yeah, Twitch is allowing this, which is worse and
Yeah.
despicable.
No, and I
blame
agree. And there would just naturally, you mentioned slippery slope, and slippery slope gets a bad reputation because a lot of times people use it in emotional arguments or the objective one. So, for example, let me give a controversial one. If abortion was more widely available, people wouldn't use safe sex because they okay, get an abortion. Therefore, it would rinse and repeat until just abortion. Everyone's just having like that would be a slippery slope argument. But there's no economic factor. There's a lot of things being ignored in that. Or we go back, or like gay marriage, right? Well, if people marry each other and they're gay, like that'd be terrible. What would happen next? Would it be adults and children? Like what would happen next? Those are all emotional things and they're ignoring factors. But slippery slope, as you're describing it, I think is a really good one in terms of, and those are just examples, guys. I'm not advocating anything, obviously, just making sure that we get I just made up absurd, horrific examples of misused slippery. As for yours, though, I thought it was very good in the sense of there's an actual economic thing, whereas you have, the site is mostly made up, if the site allows sexual content, or people like sexual content, they'll go to it. The site becomes known for sexual content. Advertisers will end up paying less to advertise there because that means there's less demand from advertisers because Disney stops wanting to advertise there. You don't have the next Marvel movie there. You don't have this or that advertised there because people want to associate it. Don't want to, maybe not even like an E-rated game wouldn't go on the site anymore because it's associated with porn. Now that there's less money for every streamer, certain streamers have to stop leaving because they don't make it financially anymore. Or it doesn't make financial sense not to hop to YouTube where you get paid that premium ad revenue because Disney knows that your stream is fine on YouTube. They can discover that. They can't do that on YouTube. It's all flat. Or on Twitch, it's all flat. And they just say everyone's the same. And that cycles. You start naturally getting more and more sexual content, which lowers the money for everybody that's not sexual content, which means everyone has that exodus over to YouTube, and you just cycle it down. So that is a long-term worry. I agree. In terms of slippery slope, it's an economic thing.
It's horrible. I mean, like without even bringing morality into that at all, but just going into our society, like susceptibility, like the fact that children will reach an age where they get curious, and yes, they will perhaps go onto porn sites and take a peek and run away in disgust and come back 2 years later. Exactly, there are places for this, but when it's hidden away in plain sight on places that are known for games, just games that toddlers can play. I know there's age restrictions on Twitch and all that, but when it starts getting integrated into places where it really shouldn't, like you're influencing younger girls, especially in this day and age. I mean, it's not good. They associate this with the easy income, where they wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to this to begin with, and it's something you should seek out. It's not something that should be forced down your throat. It's because it quickly does become propaganda. And at a young age, I mean, they did a survey where children a few years ago were literally all of them wanted to be either policemen, firemen, or they wanted to be astronauts, and that was the top dream jobs for little children. Now it's YouTubers and streamers. Most
Yes.
children on the they all want to play
Mm-hmm.
games for a living because they can see it's profitable,
Uh-huh. And it
and they
looks
love
fun.
gaming. And now next thing they notice, oh wow, it's really easy to just be born nice and prance around in a bikini and sexualize my body. And it's not that far. It's not that far a step. It really isn't, especially not if you are introduced to that concept as a
Mm-hmm.
viable one from a young age. Morality plays no role there. And even if you're not seeing it as a moral issue, it's just common decency, not respecting yourself enough to, not do it on a
Mm-hmm.
gaming site, for example. Like, let them seek it out on their own if they really want to go down that path. I'm all
Mm-hmm.
for that. I'm all for demand, and if someone wants to watch porn, then someone can supply porn. I will never impose my moral values on anyone who
Mm-hmm.
is a consensual adult. But having it done in this way on a gaming website is just beyond what I, can put up with. It's far too
Yeah.
much. I wouldn't want to have been exposed to that at the age of 12 because
Yeah.
it could have influenced me if I thought, oh, it's the norm.
I-
If you're a girl on Twitch, you sort of dress provocatively, and that's what you do. It's why I almost didn't start streaming. I thought girls on Twitch were all dressing provocatively because that's all I saw in media. So I thought if
Mm-hmm.
I started streaming, it would look horrible from an outside perspective. And ironically, we've gone all the way back to that, where
Uh-huh.
if I'm streaming, a lot of people only know of that scandal and will think that's exactly what I'm doing. And that's horrible in my culture because people will think I'm going to hell and they will judge me viciously if they don't understand what I'm doing. And most of
Mm-hmm.
them don't, not the older people. So if I can at least show them this gaming website and say, well, look, here is you play games and people watch, and that's how you get, income. And but I mean, if a big part of the site was pornography, I wouldn't be able to show this to many people. It would have to
Mm-hmm.
be a secret because they wouldn't
Right.
understand what I was doing. They'd think I do the same, and that's not right towards me, right? Because this is a
No.
gaming site. It's not a pornography site.
Yeah. And your community is thoughtful and intelligent and kind, and you've built something really important, right? They'll support you long term, hopefully, as long as you want to keep streaming. And I think that they're all there because you might be secretly putting out sexual content is just not true. It would be a lie, and it's a bad assumption. Because if Twitch is a gaming site, it's a streaming site, but it's not a porn site, right?
No,
All
it
right,
was never.
at
It
least.
started off as a gaming site. That's
Mhm.
point. That's what
Yes.
made it what it is. And
Yep.
if Twitch gets that greedy that they're prepared to throw it away, people will start to migrate towards a different side. And then, like
Yep.
you said, all that economic effects as well. It would become the worst part is it would become there would be a point because not everyone has, not everyone has certain degrees of what they are prepared to do and not. Like I have
Mhm.
my lines of what I'm prepared to do, what I'm not prepared to do. Not everyone has that, and it's a very slippery slope for female streamers to begin thinking, well, my competition is sort of half nude and I'm
Mhm.
always in a hoodie and I should maybe start considering wearing tighter clothing. And it's a slippery
Yep.
slope from that to wearing less clothing. And it forces you to sort of up your competition if all you are is an object and you're
Mhm.
objectified like we were years ago, so a lot of females have gone a long way to build up a sort of name for themselves in the gaming industry, and we saw this with the Blizzard scandal the other day. We saw it with the Gwent art and all
Mhm.
that, and even I'd really like to ignore it most of the time and pretend people are overreacting, and then it just comes out from the darkness and bites you, and it's like, no, I'm still here, I'm not gone. And you think, well, there are sites for this. At least just stick to it.
Yes.
It's all you need to do. It's so easy.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying you can't do it. Like
Mhm.
you're already making a lot of money on these sites. Just stick to your sites.
I
If
think
that's what you want to do, go do it.
excellent. I think we're in agreement there. Why don't we go ahead and move to some Q&A real fast? See what the chat has.
All right.
All right.
Yes.
First user question.
Bring it on.
In your opinion, what is the meaning of life?
Oh gosh. Well, I have a clear meaning. It's I think, okay, let's see. How can I phrase this without bringing spirituality into it? I think you should be the best person you can be and help as many people as you can in this life. I think the goal is to leave Earth a better place than it was before you came there. I sincerely believe that's the purpose of life. And if you want to go into spiritual aspect for any of you, I think you're supposed to evolve in terms of morality while you're here. You're supposed to learn some lessons. You're supposed to go through some hard times. You're supposed to come out better than that. And yeah, that's my belief. I don't think life is supposed to be easy. Let's put it like that.
I like it.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be easy. And if you realize that, then it will become easier, ironically.
I respect that. Knowing there's hardship ahead and facing it head on is often better than trying to ignore it for as long as you can. So
Yes.
I'm going to ignore two topics that came up, which was Gwent and dreams, because I have a feeling another day we'll have to end up talking in depth. We talked a lot about dreams the previous interviews. So for the person asking about dreams, check that out. Part 1. There was another good question, though I think it ties into what you just said. Are billionaires obligated to improve a society?
Okay, bringing morality in here again. Now, if you want to believe there is no purpose to life and we all just die, I think nothing matters. I don't think there's a meaning to life then. But if you think there's morality sort of exists in our society, and I think it does, or our society would fall to pieces, I think morally billionaires are obligated to help. From a capitalism point of view, definitely not. It's their money. They don't have to do anything. They don't want to. Morally, I would expect you to help with that amount. I didn't say just give it out willy-nilly. I think you should use it in an intellectual way, like Elon Musk making Tesla cars, taking us to space, perhaps. But also keep in mind they're not the government. It has been shown that a billionaire can feed all of the world for a few days, whereas the government can do it for much longer, and they don't. So you have to elect the right people into power. The billionaire isn't responsible for this, but morally, I feel that they do have to contribute. But I would never force them to.
Excellent.
Because capitalism exists for a reason. But morally, I would. I think it's necessary.
That's an excellent answer. Well, Tia, the floor is yours. Are there any lasting remarks you want to say for this interview? Conversations.
Well, I had a very great interview with you as always, John, and I appreciate you being so open to talk. And I'm glad that we can do it in a respectable, professional manner, which I would like to see more often in our little Twitch community. I think it's a really great thing you're doing, and I really do enjoy your podcast. So thanks a lot for having me once again.
My pleasure. Thank you, as always, for coming on again, the first ever repeat guest. It was truly a pleasure, Tia. It was a great conversation, and I hope to see you again soon. Definitely check out Tia on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. Keep an eye out for a book one of these years, probably pretty soon, year-wise, this year, next year, year after that, something like that. Keep an eye out. Until next time. Shoutouts to Ahmed Ali and McRandar for all their unbelievable support on Patreon.